Hi, and welcome to episode 11 of SteamLUG Cast. My name is Cheese, and we're recording this on Saturday, October the 19th. With me, I have flibitijibibo,
Hi.
John Drinkwater,
Good morning, Cheese.
and Ryan Vandendyck.
Hello, great to be here.
Hope I pronounced your name right.
It was right, that's right, yeah.
Woohoo! You even got mine, too.
I did. You're also known by Ethan Lee.
Yeah, that works, too.
So, Ryan and Ethan both worked on Waveform, or Ethan did the Linux port of Waveform. You founded Eden Industries, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And you also currently have a crowdfunding campaign running for Citizens of Earth.
Yes, also correct. You've done your homework.
Yay! That's better than last time. So, John, how you been?
Yeah, I've been great. How have you been, Cheese?
We've been without cold water for since Sunday, and our new hot water system isn't due to go until the 31st, so exciting times.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. We had a little bit of residual heat in the cylinder for a few days, which I managed to make use of, but yeah, now it's cold showers or bucket bath time.
Nice.
All right.
That's good. But yeah, that's cool. You can't complain too much about that.
I just want to bring this up. This is actually interesting for myself and Ryan. I mean, we worked together on the Waveform port, but this is actually the first time that we've really spoken on Waveform or anything in a really long time. This is like an interesting reunion thing. So
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, also I think it's probably the first time we've also spoken voice to voice, right?
I think so. I don't remember if we ever did a call. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's a pleasure, whatever it is, though. Yes.
oh yeah.
SteamLUG Cast, bringing people together.
Yeah.
How did you two get in touch with each other, exactly?
I poked him about, well, he actually, on the website for Eden, when Waveform was brand new, he had a job posting for audio programmer, which at the time I was interested in, so I was like, okay. And I poked him about that, and he went, well, first of all, I emailed him the day that it launched, so he was like, give me 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then once we actually discussed it, the thing is, I was on Linux at the time, so I was like, maybe I'll just make an internal port and hopefully nobody will notice. But then when that subject came up, it's like, why don't we just do the ports first and see what happens? So I ended up doing that. But by the time that was done, I had started work on Blueberry Garden and eVersion, and then Humble found me, and then now we're here.
So what was the initial reason for you wanting the audio work done, Ryan?
Well, I had an idea for Waveform to have a mode or some kind of spin-off or something where, similar to games like AudioSurf, where you would generate levels based on the music, because I already had, Waveform, that deep space mode, which was sort of like a randomly generated, kind of endless level you could play. And I thought, well, just having a, kind of additional mode that was all generated by music seemed like a pretty cool thing. A lot of people had mentioned it because of, you're playing on waves. It kind of lends itself, I guess, to that musical type experience.
Because Flibit's background is audio as well.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. Until this whole porting thing started, that was pretty much what I've been doing for the last decade or so. So yeah.
Right.
So there's still chances of that content for Waveform making an appearance at some stage?
I mean, I would love to do it. I still love Waveform. I still want to do lots of different things with it. But it's sort of
pretty much every game you work on, it's there's always that one thing you want to go back and do. For the Steambox, I probably want to go back and put it on S2 instead of SD 1.2, and you could fix the stack allocator so crashes don't happen as often and all this stuff. Then you actually go back to it, and it's like, oh god, the memories. Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think the game, it has a special place in my heart as kind of being the first indie game I released, and there's a lot of things I want to do with it still, and just in terms of straight ports and just expanded content type things. It has to, at some sense, it has to be kind of worth it financially to make sure I'm still paying rent and stuff, so there's always that as a bit of a concern. So if the community demands it, I would love to do it, but yeah, right now it doesn't seem like it's maybe the greatest financial decision, so...
Yeah, money and time. That's really the only thing. Design, we kind of have it, and I think I still have my old docs where I had the technical stuff outlined. It's just because the thing is, I was planning to basically spend a whole summer doing that, so it's okay, I gotta carve out that time to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe something for Waveform too.
Yeah, maybe.
So, Flibit, were you expecting to be doing any porting going into Waveform, and coming out of that was there anything that kind of steered you towards the directions that you ended up going in?
When I saw the project, I was like, well, it's all open libraries. Maybe I'll just make a port for myself and just do the audio tech and hope that it works on Windows. But but then the port came up. It's like, well, this is actually a reasonable commercial endeavor, so may as well do that. And then I actually ended up enjoying that enough to where because the thing is, we had planned to ship it for the summer sale, and so I had a little small buffer of time. We actually ended up missing the deal that it was in, which partially I kind of messed up, but I had some space in between, so I ended up porting a couple more games. And then by the time I had all that up and on Steam and such, Humble contacted me and was like, oh, I can make this a real job. And then I ended up not going back to university, and that still is the case. So yeah, motivations is as in, yeah, it was fun to do, and I got paid money for it, which was very new to me.
So what kind of reception have you had from Linux users in regard to Waveform?
I think it's been pretty good. I don't know if I don't use Linux personally, so I guess I'm not like as involved necessarily, in all that. But it certainly seemed to me that they were very excited to be able to play the game and have, just in general, more game support on Linux, and also sometimes more forgiving of problems, than people on Windows. So in that sense, it was really nice interacting with Linux users, and yeah, I thought it was good.
It's also nice having the hacker mentality when it comes to problems, because sometimes it's still very typical for me, like when something crashes, particularly for C or C++ project, that I'll get like a stack trace and like a register dump for their bug report, and for like recent monogame titles that I'm working on, people will send me like patches. So it's like, oh.
So have you found that that's changed at all since Steam for Linux has launched and more people are using, presumably, Linux for games? We're getting new people migrate across who may not have that kind of culture.
I think I recall there being a very big jump in users when Steam for Linux, the beta came out, because when they announced that Steam for Linux was out, and then they contacted developers asking, if they wanted to participate. Like Waveform and Inversion were the two that we jumped on. So we were like, I think there was only 20 games that started it, and Waveform was one of them.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't much in the beta at the time. I think everyone there just thought, well, I'll buy this, and
Yeah, that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Waveform for Linux, that was distributed by Steam before Steam supported Linux, right?
Well, the workaround was that people would put the Windows version up, and then somewhere inside the Windows installation, you'd have like a little archive with the Linux binaries, and like Dungeons of Dreadmore did this. I think Steelstorm did it as well.
Yeah.
But towards the end, by the time they had pretty much announced that Linux, they were going to have a version, they were like, okay, let's not have people do that anymore. So what I would kind of do is have people install Waveform through Wine, and then if they wanted the binaries, I just kind of give it to them. But then, obviously, once we got the beta up, we were able to just make that the standard.
Yeah.
Early on in the beta, Flibit, there were quite a few issues just interacting with the overlay and other things. And
right.
Quite a lot of that has been solved over the last year. Do you think there are any outstanding issues that Steam for Linux has that you'd worry about?
Well, funny thing is, the bug with the overlay thing was a triangle of just problems on everybody's end, where it was Steam's overlay was injecting a GLX swap buffers, which is how it draws the overlay. But then the NVIDIA driver was using something for memory allocation that we were messing up because we actually overload memory allocation operators for the stack allocator. So as soon as we did something with the overlay or the NVIDIA driver wanted something, the thing would just crash. But if you took out any one of those three in the equation, for instance, turning off the overlay or using a different driver or removing the stack allocator, it would work just fine. So I don't know, that was a real specific issue, but when it comes to outstanding Steam issues, I can't really think of any. If you talk to Edward Rudd or another porter, they'll complain about the Steam runtime. But honestly, I'm not running into that issue yet. For now, I'm indifferent towards the runtime, especially since SteamOS is going to be based on that. So you may as well adjust towards it.
True. I mean, there's the Steamworks and the rest, but I mean, that's all getting smoothed over, isn't it?
Once SteamOS came out, it was mostly, the only thing I've really been paying attention to is big picture mode, which actually there is one issue with big picture mode, is that controller input isn't, you know how in the overlay, when you turn on the overlay, the input gets caught, so it won't you won't do double mouse input.
Yep.
Well, CMOS, the announcement came out. I should have said that. But this is me not being good at words. But
It's cool.
but for some reason, controller input only on Linux seems to have this problem where if you after you hit the guide button, it'll actually still control the game at the same time as the overlay. I think it's just something where you have to intercept the SDL events. But other than that, that's like a weird edge casey issue. Like it works in other places, so maybe it's just this one platform that's a little bit weird.
I think that must be SDL because Dota has the same issue when you pull up the overlay and alt tab to something else. It will receive mouse input still, so it will scroll to another side of the map.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ryan, I find that waveforms, waveforms interface mechanics are surprisingly intuitive. Did they go through any kind of tuning before they got to the point that they're in now?
Well, first, thank you. I'm glad you find them intuitive. But it's funny. Like the controls were definitely, kind of the first thing I made in the game. Like the first idea for the game was, hey, what would it be like to control a sine wave? And so for the first, couple days, I mean, that's all I worked on is, hey, what is it like to just, drag the mouse back and forth and see a sine wave move? And, a lot of the first, I don't know, month, 2 months, 3 months was really just nailing down the, what was fun about that experience of, manipulating a wave. So, that experience and sort of fine tuning that experience came really early. Like, we're talking, 2009, right? I mean, the game didn't come out till March 2012. So it was, very early. And I knew, that, the game would kind of live or die by how well and how intuitive you were able to move that wave. So certainly that was a huge part of the development, certainly the kind of the first thing that I wanted to focus on. But then after that point, once we had that nailed down, I mean, the levels were all built around how how it felt, and sort of these experiences were built around that control scheme. So after, those first couple of months when I was really experimenting and fine tuning it, it didn't really change for the next, 2.5 years or something. And yeah, most people, the only thing I ever got in terms of like feedback for the controls was like people would think that, up and down, like maybe should have been reversed or flipped or something. But people tended to get it pretty fast. And yeah, so, I mean, like I said, outside of the kind of first prototype stage of developing the controls, they stayed pretty constant. And yeah, most people, as soon as they got over the first, I guess, hump of like, whoa, I'm moving a wave around. Yeah, it tended to be received very well.
Yeah, I just really found that everybody I've shown it just picked it up so fast.
Yeah, I remember playing with the demo and like, because I mean, the waveform idea, like, as someone who did a lot of audio stuff, like, I was like, all right, that's pretty much an instant amount of interest, and then I kind of fiddled with it and went, wow, I'm surprised this hasn't been done before, and if it has, then I don't know how I didn't see it, because it's pretty neato.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen any, because most of the controls seem to make sense right away, and I don't think I've ever seen any. I'm now thinking about that inverting the y-axis. I'm trying to envision that. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on where you're looking on the wave when you go up, because it like if you're looking at a part where it's already like extending upwards and you go up, then I guess it makes sense because it's kind of going up the way you think. But if you're looking at a spot where it's kind of below the neutral axis type thing, you might expect it to go kind of like to shrink towards your mouse if you're looking up. Like I think it's like a small mental kind of leap to get there, but yeah, I think it's reasonably intuitive.
What are your thoughts on the new Steam controller and how that might change how you'd input or manipulate this wave?
Mm-hmm. Even beyond the Steam controller, people have asked me about supporting like the Xbox controller and things like that, and I mean, it was certainly something that I had been thinking about a lot, during the development of the game. But actually, and an interesting point actually is that the very first control of the game was actually by keyboard. So you just like, WASD to move it around, which, as you can imagine, switching to mouse was like night and day, so much smoother, right? And in a way, I kind of feel, I didn't really prototype this. I mean, it's probably worth trying, but I kind of feel like, yeah, doing the controller is almost kind of going backwards a little bit to where it was with the keyboard. Now, I mean, granted, controllers do have a lot of analog input. I mean, with the sticks and some, at least on the Xbox controller, the trigger buttons are analog. And I mean, I think it would be something I would consider doing if the demand is there. But it really just occurs to me that, I mean, the mouse is certainly the most kind of freest form of just, moving and stretching and, without the constraints, I guess, that, the digital controls have. So, like I said, it's something I would consider doing, but I am a little worried that it would compromise the experience a bit to the point where people might be like, oh, actually, these controls aren't as good as I was expecting them to be. And I would kind of be like, well, just play it with a mouse then, or so, but obviously I don't come with the game to tell them that.
Yeah.
So I'd be worried about if their first impression was with the controller and they didn't feel it was as good, they just put it down.
Yeah. The good thing about the Steam controller, though, like, people who haven't seen the demo did a video on YouTube of the Steam controller with the touchpads, and you can actually do some pretty tight mouse control with it. They did a demo of Papers, Please, where both of the touchpads, you could do combined mouse input.
Yeah.
So you could get really super precise input with both of those, and it was
okay.
And I think the dual touchpad with as mouse input would make the wave control with controller actually pretty good, as opposed to relative analog control like a joystick where you only go one direction and the dead zone is a mess.
And the benefit of it being able to emulate a mouse just by default will mean that it might be that the default mapping works perfectly fine in the game,
right,
without having to do any customization.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, it could work really well. Yeah, for sure.
I really like the effort that Valve seem to be putting into traditional mouse and keyboard emulation on the controller. I think that's really interesting.
Because it works, so it may as well try and have a form for it.
Yeah, and the notion of blending movement between the two touchpads is that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but the next game that they're working on, Citizens of Earth, would probably work better with it. Well, would it work better with the controller? Actually, I played with a demo, and because I'm thinking, like, I'm comparing it to Earthbound, and Earthbound is obviously like a SNES game, so it would work. But I don't know how complex Citizens is going to get.
Yeah,
we should probably start bringing up.
Right now, controller support is it's kind of limited. Like, certainly the mouse is, again, it's sort of fully supported. We do intend to this game to fully support controllers, since, as you say, Earthbound and a lot of other RPGs, do just with a controller. I don't know if it's just me. Like, I personally really like playing games with a mouse and just having, like, Citizens, you can walk anywhere. Like, you're not confined to. I mean, I guess with an analog stick, I guess again you can, you are free to kind of move in kind of the 360 degrees. I don't know. For me, it just feels really smooth, and I can just point over here and I'll move there and point here. Yeah, maybe it could just be me, but I find it very freeing. But again, that being said, we are really going to support controllers for people who want just, I don't know, so, having a controller in your hand often does feel really good. And I think, for some menu navigation, it's easier than having to move the mouse and point, I guess. So, but I mean, that's the point, is we're trying to support it either way for people just to choose their preference. And
yeah, nothing wrong with preferring keyboard and mouse.
Yep.
Hooray! I'm normally the only not console user in the cast, so it's nice to have somebody who appreciates good keyboard and mouse. So, Citizens of Earth, tell us about how the inspiration for this game came about.
Yeah, so the first, so actually, Citizens of Earth, I had been designing since before I even came up with Waveform, actually. It's a reasonably old idea, but, many years ago when I was sort of starting to make games, I didn't really think I had the technical ability, and certainly not, the art support, et cetera, that I would need for an RPG, which is why I went with something a bit, smaller with Waveform. But the original idea of Citizens of Earth was, hey, what would it be like to play an RPG as the regular people that are normally in most RPGs, right? So the shopkeepers and the random NPCs, and because it occurred to me, you play a game, I don't know, like Final Fantasy or whatever, and it's like, oh, like the world's coming to an end. It's like this horrible catastrophe, and yet there's like 6 people who are willing to do something about it. And everyone else is content to just live their lives while this evil menace like threatens to destroy everyone. I'm like, why don't you pick up a shovel and just start bashing monsters? Like, to do your part, right? Or at least, don't charge the heroes to use your inn. Like, they're saving everyone's life. Maybe let them take a bed for free, right? So, so the first seed of the idea was, like, what would it be like to just play as the regular people? And, certainly from there, Earthbound became a big, inspiration, I guess, in 2 ways. One, I mean, they just had a really fun cast of regular characters, in a sense. And 2, I just felt like if I'm going with this idea of regular people, then a modern setting felt kind of appropriate. And I mean, and then from there, I had this idea, well, if I'm recruiting all these regular people, like, what's the main character going to be? I mean, he's probably not going to be also fighting, because, then just from like a balance standpoint, you have like one character that's super strong, and I was like, that's weird. So he should be someone who's not going to fight. And again, going with the idea of like, well, what kind of character in a modern world would lead regular people around and tell them what to do? And I was like, wow, the vice president of the world, that's perfect. So that's how we got the main character. And I mean, yeah, that was the kind of process from the initial seed to kind of mainly where we are now with kind of the shape of the design. So
did you have much of a consideration of how limited a party you wanted?
Yeah. I mean, like, one big thing that was like a core design element from the beginning was this sort of mantra of recruit anyone. And again, that goes back to the idea of like, there's no regular people in the game. Like, you can recruit anyone. So we knew that we wanted to support a really vast, cast of characters that you could play. We have this mechanic where, since everyone's just a regular person, they have a day job. And when you're not using them, they go back to their day job and they're kind of stronger at their day job because you leveled them up. So people who run stores have like new items and, rare items and stuff. And people who run, the school teacher has a school and you can enroll citizens there to gain levels passively. And the police officer has these wanted posters so you can hunt down fugitives. And, everyone has this, unique job. And whether it's providing new items or new content or access to new areas or, anything, right? There's so many features, and, we sort of tied them to these characters to make this, huge world, this grassroots movement where everyone was contributing, not just in battle, but kind of outside battle as well. So yeah, right from the beginning, we wanted this idea that, you're recruiting the whole world.
So what challenges is the world facing in Citizens of Earth? What's the threat?
Yeah, okay. So when the game starts, you are like the newly elected vice president of the world. So you just won the election and you go back to your hometown for kind of, some rest and relaxation, I guess, a bit of a celebration of your victory. So the game opens with your mom waking you up, getting you out of bed. It's sort of an homage to the opening scene of Chrono Trigger, if you're familiar with that. But, you're like a 40-year-old man who's like an elected world leader. And so it's, it kind of starts off just with a bit of this parody and, humorous tone. And so what happens is, some weird stuff kind of starts happening around town. I mean, there's a protest of people because, they don't like you, you're a politician. And as you kind of dive deeper into the story, I mean, some people are missing and some weird stuff is going on kind of around town and the outskirts. And you don't really want to get your hands dirty, because, again, you're a bureaucrat. You're like, that's not for me. But you are the elected official. So you're like, well, I should probably do something about it. So that's why you kind of go around recruiting these regular people, kind of leading them around, getting them to do your dirty work for you and kind of getting to the bottom of like why there's some weird stuff happening and, what exactly is going on around the town. And then, of course, as you explore the game, like actually what's happening to the whole world. So
cool. And how long have you been working on Citizens of Earth?
We shipped Waveform in March 2012, and then the next month or two was mainly like DLC and post launch support and that kind of stuff. But I did start on Citizens of Earth like in a limited capacity while I was doing all of that, and probably May would have been kind of the start of like, okay, now I'm sort of full bore on this project. So that was about a year and a half ago. So I've been basically working on it, full time for a year and a half, I suppose.
And so you've launched a crowdfunding campaign now. How has that changed the way that you're approaching working on the game?
Well, the crowdfunding campaign is it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, there's whatever there is, 2 days remaining or 3 days remaining or something. We have not raised that much. I don't know, it's like 34,000 out of 100,000. So we certainly have to raise the lion's share of it in the next couple days, which in a way, it's a bit disappointing. I think like, I really feel like not only put a lot of work into the game, but we did spend a lot of time on the Kickstarter project itself. I mean, if you look, there's a lot of, kind of unique art decorating the page that was made just for that Kickstarter project. And so, yeah, in a sense, it's a bit disappointing, but on the other hand, we did release the demo on the Kickstarter, Windows only, unfortunately, for now. But, the reception to that has been amazing. I don't think a single person has played it and got back to me and said, nah, not my game. Everyone's like, this game is amazing. I love it, and I want more, like, give me more. So it's very much, like I said, a roller coaster of ups and downs. It's like, I really wish, we could have raised more money. Fingers crossed, who knows what's going to happen, but it kind of looks like the Kickstarter will not be successful. But on the other hand, we've gotten amazing response from the people who have actually played it. and we were accepted onto Steam recently without having to go through Greenlight,
Nice.
which was great.
Yeah, congrats for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that was really good. Yeah, it's a lot of work and a roller coaster is really the best way to describe it. So people have asked me like, oh, well, if the Kickstarter is not successful, like, are you going to stop working on the game? And I mean, the answer is no. Like, we've been working on 1.5 years. We're not going to stop now. But obviously, it does make us make some tough decisions in some sense about how to kind of go about finishing it. So,
do you think that the extra visibility that a crowdfunding campaign, even a failed one, gives a project can be, is that something that you think you can draw upon to give you to gain extra support outside of crowdfunding, or to give you a better chance of succeeding if you decide to run a second crowdfunding campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly no negative to it. Like I don't necessarily think a crowdfunding campaign, a failed one, is a bad thing. Like I said, people get to notice it and get to see it and check it out, and even if it's not successful, it certainly is out there a little bit more, in the public consciousness, and places have done reviews of it, or done the let's play videos on YouTube, which is good. So it has helped us kind of push the message a bit more. But in a way, it also, I think I'm starting to realize that I am probably not a very good game promoter. I think I'm a pretty good game developer, but when it comes to letting people know about the games, I don't think I do a very good job. And I mean, I think that's partially because like there's a lot of indies who are a lot more successful than I am, and they'll do things like they're running blogs and they're doing this and that, they're interacting with all these communities, and like, I mean, I do enjoy that kind of stuff, but I'm also like, oh, well, tonight I could write a blog entry, or I could write, a cool new feature for my game. And I always default to, well, I'm gonna make a new feature.
Right.
And I think, that helps me make a really good game,
Yeah.
but maybe just not a game that is like as successful in the sense of like, people really getting behind it and, knowing about it in terms of like a really broad market.
I have no idea whether there's a lot of, prominent and active from a blogging and tweeting and community interaction standpoint. I have no idea where these people find their time. It's mad.
I remember, because I remember doing a similar thing for the port of Waveform. Like I had there's a thread somewhere, I have a link to my site where it's like the Waveform port blog, where I tried to kind of go step by step what I was planning, what I was doing, and it worked successfully. And it pretty much the only time I ever updated it was when like I was kind of burned on the project. I was like, all right, I can if I write a single line of code, it's going to be terrible. I'll somehow mess up a printf. So it's like, all right, so maybe I'll write about what I've at least attempted to do, and that'll warm me back up again. So and you kind of notice towards the end of the actual port, the posts started to slow down, because by that point I was like burning through it. So I was like, all right, maybe no time to write a thing. Or it was like so tedious, like, ooh, we're gonna debug for a whole month. I bet they want to read about that. My guess is that when people write those things, if they're at the point where it's like, I cannot write a single line, I need to do something else. So like it'd be like a nice break, I think, if you like writing at least. But I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Of course, I'm also someone who's like, I usually at this point I don't even have to promote my own work. It's like it's a little bit weird having that kind of market where you don't have to advertise a whole lot. The whole struggle of getting your game advertised is really difficult. So even for ports, because like Rogue Legacy, that went out on Wednesday, and while it was very much anticipated, I think, from people who were paying close attention, getting it out to more people has been, I don't know, less bug reports, I guess. But
I think for me too is like, in addition, to doing the programming, I mean, obviously on Citizens of Earth and Waveform too. I mean, I'm also doing, design, and I'm managing a team. And I'm also, I have a couple other games I'm working on that haven't been announced besides Citizens of Earth. So, if I get bored writing code on Citizens of Earth, there's like half dozen or more things that I could do also. And so, it's like, so again, I do, it is interesting, to tell, kind of blog and tell people what to do. But I don't know, there's something in the back of my head that's just like, well, like go, go make another feature, or, or choose, go work on another game if you want, like something that's more like, I don't know, that like me personally, like is sort of my specialty. Like anyone can write a blog, right? Like, I could probably pay someone to write a blog describing my own work. They could just, they could almost make it up or just post, screenshots and be like, this is what I'm working on, right? Like, and it would probably almost be indistinguishable from something I would do, in a sense. But like, where I think my skill set is, right, is, programming and designing and making new games. And it's like, so somehow it's like, that's just, I don't know, I get it in my head that that's what I should focus on and forget the rest, even though, the rest of the stuff, I think, as people have shown, can be very, fruitful and beneficial for like the game as a whole and like getting it out there. So
that's why I like Twitter, actually. It's like if I just don't have enough time to do something, I'll just post a terrible screenshot. Like,
yeah.
people really liked following me on Twitter during Vessel, where some of the bugs I was finding during instance drawing were just terrifying. Like, instead of like it would rain a lot in the game, but since I wasn't doing the vertex and fragment colors or like the positions properly, it would literally just rain giant red triangles of death.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, this is going up on Twitter.
It's also interesting to watch the the evolution
Mm-hmm.
of stuff when you've been posting screenshots.
They like it for that very reason, right? But I don't know. Yeah, again, it's like I think it's a discipline of like getting into the habit of taking screenshots and helping frame that evolution.
I haven't been able to do that as often.
Is well, something I certainly am, I don't know, not good at or don't put enough attention towards anyway.
When I make stuff, I always plan to sort of get screenshots early on, or try and get screenshots of a single thing, so I can put some kind of time lapse video together of showing the evolution of something. But it's just never have time.
70 FPS is actually really good, because I think about like 70 FPS where you have 7 days to make something. You could either post like a link, which basically is just like, here's the download, but people like at the end, I guess like the last 5 minutes or so, they just like, here's what it looks like, I guess, where they kind of have to have the discipline to make it visible to people who actually go to the link when there's like 100,000 entries. Something like that. It's interesting to see if that's just making the page for the entries, how people figure that's another learning experience for people.
Yeah, and that's got the whole kind of blog posty type thing, and that in itself drives a lot of people back to the individual game profiles as well.
Yeah, and speaking of like showing the evolution of something, I actually had this idea. I don't think I've ever mentioned this before, so this is exclusive for SteamLUG Cast right here. I was actually going to include in Waveform like a demo of the original prototype, so you kind of see, with like the really old mechanics and visuals to just show like, hey, this is what it looked like when I made the decision that this was going to be a game that I'm actually going to make, just so people could get perspective on like, from like what it was when I was sort of, I guess, convinced that, wow, this could be a game, to kind of finally what it became. So, but it never happened. It was making a game is too exhausting to actually like worry about supporting some antiquated demo inside the game itself. So
Yeah.
It'd be neat to see, presumably you've still got that kicking around and you can fire it up. It'd be neat to see a video at least, or something, just show some before and after stuff.
Well, so interestingly, I'm trying to remember now. Oh, I think, so Waveform had a Kickstarter too, and it was also unsuccessful. But for that Kickstarter, actually, I did make a video talking about the game, and I showed footage, I think at least 4 clips of kind of like evolution of the game from like really early and then kind of like 3 iterations to like, I guess, near final. So I guess that video still exists on YouTube, so that would kind of show it a little bit.
So is that in 2001? 2011, sorry?
The Kickstarter was 2011, yeah.
I do remember that, actually. Yeah, the Basement Collection that Edmund McMillan put out, like, I guess it was just like a massive Flash compilation of all of the things. I think somewhere in there you could dig up like old Meat Boy prototypes or something like that. I forget.
This is a bit where we all get distracted reading what John posted.
Yeah, that does tend to happen.
Linux support is kind of promised in the Citizens of Earth crowdfunding campaign. Is this something that you're looking at bringing Flibit back for?
If he wants to do it, I'm totally on board with him taking that on again.
Yeah, I could. I mean, it's probably because I remember it wasn't actually that early on. It was actually for a while, even after like the engine for Waveform, and back then it was called like Destiny of the Crown or something.
Yeah. Well, that's like a whole different project altogether. It's a whole different kind of RPG idea.
Oh, really? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Actually, I think I even mentioned it on the Waveform Kickstarter. I think it's buried somewhere that I was working on that other game. But yeah, we do want to come back to it. Destiny of the Crown was another RPG idea, and that's kind of, we had been building this RPG tech for that game, but then kind of decided to do Citizens of Earth instead. So I do hope to come back to it someday. So yeah, there you go, another exclusive for the SteamLUG Cast.
I remember you posted about it. Like I remember you posted about it on Twitter, and I was like, "Is this the next?" Like I wasn't sure if that was like a code word or something. This is before the port was even out, where you had mentioned like some interesting RPG stuff, and that particular code word in particular was like, maybe that's their next. And then Citizens came out, like, oh, maybe that's the final name or something.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, kind of unrelated. Although a lot of the RPG kind of just general RPG work that went into Destiny of the Crown. I mean, we reused it for Citizens. Actually, Destiny of the Crown kind of began as like a prototype that I made a long time ago, years and years ago, while I was still in school, actually. Or still in school, or was I working at Next Level Games as a co-op student then? I can't remember. It was somewhere back in those early days. But yeah, so it was an RPG, and I thought it was pretty cool. And then actually, and this is like October 2009 or something, I had Waveform prototype. I had the Destiny of the Crown prototype, and I had this whole other prototype. So through 3 games. So at the time, yeah, I was working at Next Level Games, which you might know from like most recently Luigi's Mansion, Dark Moon. And we were actually talking about sort of partnering to make Waveform or, one of these other prototypes that I had. And so they had got me to kind of demo all 3 games, to the various designers and game directors they had there. And, Waveform stood out as sort of like the game that everyone really kind of gravitated to immediately. So that was part of the reason why I just decided to go with that one over these other 2. But there's one guy there who was a big fan of RPGs, and like I think he almost like crapped his pants when he saw my RPG prototype. He would just grab random employees walking by and just like start explaining my game to them because he was just so excited about it. So that was the Destiny of the Crown prototype, and I do think it's a good idea. And I mean, certainly has, I guess, generated excitement in at least one person so far. So yeah, I would like to come back to it. Maybe once Citizens is done, I'm sure making another RPG would probably be a lot easier than making one, since I can reuse all that tech. So that'd be pretty cool.
Rolling back to the original question, yeah, I'll probably go back because the tech is mostly the same, to my understanding.
Yeah. It's almost identical. Yeah, I mean, I added a lot more shaders in this game than Waveform had, but the general rendering tech is identical. The audio identical. Most of I think most or all of that SGL port you had done is still intact. So I presume it should be a lot easier than even Waveform was. So
yeah, and anything, pretty much just the first thing I'll do in the port is update to STL2, which is like,
okay, yeah,
that's like 5 minutes worth, and it's and the benefits are so wonderful.
Yes.
Right.
Ask anyone here in this room, because we've had to deal with STL games for a decade now, and STL2 blows it out of the water.
So following on from that, when Citizens of Earth is finally ready for release, can we expect to see a simultaneous launch, including a Linux release at the same time?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean it's 2014 launch, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because like right now I'm doing like if you knew how many games I was working on simultaneously for 2013 alone, you'd be shocked. But 2014 is a lot more open.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, Flibit, coming back to you for a bit. I mean, you kind of Waveform was one of your very early ports.
It was the first.
Yeah. You've just had Rogue Legacy released. What do you feel that you've learned between now and then?
That I don't like deadlines.
Oof, I think that's pretty universal.
It's like, yeah, like when I look at the games that have deadlines and those that don't, because the thing is, I've only been, if we count April 20th or April 22nd, 2012 is the first day that I ever started porting games. Since then, I've ported about over 10 games, 13 to Linux and Mac. The games that have deadlines, the games that don't, like they're shockingly different. There are some, like obviously some games I was able to go back to and kind of get back to what I'm used to, but like if you look at the support queue for games that I just kind of did whenever I wanted, like they're like Rogue Legacy was just whenever. Oh, we can release it this week? All right, sure. And I've gotten like one bug report. And it's like performance related, so it's like, okay, that'll happen. Other than that, the use of libraries is another thing where it's like, I think about, well, like, the thing is when you pick libraries, you have to think about not just if they're good or not, but the people who are working on them also kind of is a big deal. Like with SDL, that has like Ryan Gordon and people from Loki, and now Valve is a lead developer on SDL. So it's like, okay, this is really great. Whereas when I was dealing with Monogame, which is the XNA version, XNA re-implementation, like it's a it's a good re-implementation of XNA, but the community of people who made it to start with didn't really know, like they were like XNA enthusiasts. So it's like, well, we can just do this again, right? But they don't know anything about the low level or like haven't with multi-platform because XNA did that for them. So it's like, okay, how do we do this? And even now, like I just did a rewrite of the platform re-implementation, and it's still like a total mess. And they're still adding more platforms, so it's getting even more fun to work with. So there's like the concern where open source projects, you want like professional people all the time, but sometimes with open source stuff, having just plain old volunteers or people who just like want to hack on something is very beneficial. Where like, for some of my ports, I get patches from users, so it's like, that's great, and they're great. But having a professional be able to do the big picture, like the design of the massive project, is very, very helpful. And so yeah, like in general, especially like with libraries that like get support dropped. Like I'm trying to remember a recent project that just flat out dropped a platform. Like I can just imagine like a middleware. Like if a platform gets dropped, that developer is screwed essentially. So the two things you have to really consider are who's working on the library, what background do they have in terms of design when they have to think about the distant future, or you have to think about, if you don't have control of the platform support, what's going to happen if they drop it? Because that like Wise, when people have Wise and they want a Linux version, at this point they just have to use Wine, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's not a good situation, really.
Yeah. So that was what was really nice about Waveform as my first port, which is what all the libraries that Ryan was using was. It was like OpenGL, OpenAL, and then like FreeImage, which, I mean, I ended up moving to STLimage just because, but I mean, it was really easy to port and really easy to understand what the problems were because I could just debug it.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, for better or worse, I like writing my own tech just for that reason. Like, if there's a problem, I could just debug it. I'm not reliant on like, some obscure DLL from, that I have no idea what's happening, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I've had fun with that.
And you've also got more flexibility with being able to, if you ever down this track decided you want to do an open source release.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're using your own stuff, you've got that kind of control.
Right. Yeah. I've always like, I wonder, because I've never really poked devs about open source releases. Usually funny thing is usually fans do that anyway. Like Capsized, one of the first questions on the AMA we did for that humble bundle was like, of course someone's going to ask, which of your games are going to be open sourced one day? And like, it was interesting seeing the answers from everybody about like, some people were like, I don't want anybody to see my code, it's terrible, or it's interesting, especially as a contractor who sees code from others, where it's like, the first thing I hear from every client, I know, I'm sorry if my code's terrible. I'm like, dude, everybody's code is terrible.
Right.
My code, you're going to look at some of the stuff I write in your engine and you're going to cry. Like,
Brilliant.
It's like, it's interesting seeing like the psychology of how different backgrounds of programmers think about certain things. And open source releases of projects is always the most fun.
So, both of you, are there any kind of future plans, things on the horizon that you feel comfortable talking about?
I'll let Ryan start because I'm sure his is more exciting than mine.
With the way the Kickstarter's going, there's, we're certainly looking into options now with like, what it means that we don't have that funding and, what we have to do. So I guess this is kind of not even quite what you're asking, but so there is something really exciting that I would love to announce, but I can't right now. So that's, I guess, a little bit anticlimactic because I'm not saying anything, but there is some very cool things in the works.
That's cool.
Oh.
And I mean, I guess, obviously I've mentioned that Nintendo has, sent us a Wii U dev kit, and I'm planning on I'm hoping to port Citizens to that. And I think, I'd probably look into doing Waveform as well on that. Also, at some point, actually, I do have a guy right now doing the Android port of Waveform because he likes Android, and
yeah.
I almost had an iPhone port done. It was working perfectly on the simulator, but like on the device there was some crash. I think it was like some memory weirdness from the.
It's the allocator, man.
Well, yeah, but. Suffice to say, I think the guy I was working with got a little, I don't know, deflated that, I think he thought it would be a lot easier than it was. And I thought actually it was pretty darn easy compared to like some other things, but it certainly wasn't trivial, I guess. But yeah, so suffice to say, I think there are some ports probably coming of Waveform and Citizens. As I mentioned, there's a couple other projects I'm sort of working on. This kind of goes back a ways now. I think, way back, was it January, when I first announced Citizens of Earth, I kind of also announced at the same time this new initiative that I was doing called the Garden of Indie. And so that, that whole thing is sort of about like, partnering with people and sort of sharing tech and sharing,
right,
I don't know, just, expertise with other people that want to make games. And so there's a guy on my team right now, Chris, who has a pretty cool idea. And so I'm sort of, working on him, working with him on a project, and sort of, again, like reusing a lot of the tech from Citizens of Earth and Waveform as well. And just, kind of, that is something I'm pretty passionate about going forward, is like, again, like for better or worse, I wrote my own engine. I mean, there's some pros and cons for sure, but one thing I really want to do is, leverage it to help other people make games, and, partner with them in ways that, just getting like, again, like, my buddy Chris, who I'm working with, like, he is not a programmer at all. So even if he were to get like, Unity or something, like, he still make a game in Unity, like, but partnering with me, it's like, well, I have this engine and I can help, kind of just do a little bit to support the unique stuff he needs while leveraging all the stuff that I've done for Citizens and Waveform. So going forward, I hope to do a lot more of that kind of stuff, partnering with, brand new people like Flibit. I mean, he just emailed me and said, hey, can I, do this, or can we do a port? And I mean, yeah, that's great, right? And I mean, I'm always keen to work with people who, have that kind of passion and self-motivation. So yeah, even beyond Citizens, certainly there's going to be, I think, in the future, hopefully you'll see from me new projects along those lines, partnering with new people and just trying to spread the indie love a bit like that. So
fantastic.
You brought up the Android port. I saw I saw work on that when I was just like browsing the recent source, and I was like, oh, and the funny thing is he was actually porting to the OpenAL stuff. He was porting to like STL Mixer, because that's supposed to be easier for Android, which actually makes sense. But if we do an STL2 version, it'll probably help with iOS and Android, because STL2 actually supports those natively. So yeah, I don't know. It's like something like that. Because like the STL2 is just better, so it's like that would probably help with porting a waveform a little bit. And if the STL2 stuff is solid enough and it is portable across things that have OpenGL drivers, then you can just make an STL2 implementation of that platform and it just works.
Yeah.
Because I think I frequently consider PS4 and PS Vita versions of the STL2, because that's like a frequently requested platform from me for some reason. But I mean, it's certainly feasible. But yeah, like people seem to think that I could just go straight to the PS4, I guess. Yeah. But I don't know anything about it.
I think there's a misconception that, it's sort of Linuxy and OpenGL when it's not really, and it's sort of BSD and Sony's low-level APIs.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, one funny thing too is I think, people have asked me like why I'm not just by default porting it, games to everything, because I don't know if it's people are, thinking like everything is like Unity or something, like you just press a button and it just like ports it to PS4, But yeah, literally people ask like, oh, why isn't PS4 just a default? Like, what do you mean you have to work on that? I was like, well,
as someone who works at portability, that's always that's always a really fun question to see. I'm like, oh man, if you knew how much, if you knew that I genuinely made a living just from that. But I mean, like, there's some stuff to some degree that's feasible, like STL2 definitely, like if you use the STL2 rendering API, you can actually even run a Direct3D or OpenGL driver dynamically on Windows, for instance. But like adding like an entire console is a different story. So yeah, it's always fun to see, like, because sometimes some of the stretch goals are a little bit weird. Like I see like Linux stretch goals that are like $100,000. I'm like, I'd take that check. Like, but like if it's like, sometimes you'll see one that's like the very first stretch goal is like 10 grand, and it's like, okay, we're gonna try to get this simultaneously instead of having to do it like 2 months later with the revenue. It's like, okay, it's fine. Or like Wii U version is like, I don't know how much like Wii U dev costs are, but like seeing some of the costs, like, console dev is probably super expensive.
Yeah, I mean, the price ranges, but I mean, you're certainly paying thousands of dollars for any dev kit on any system, right? So
right.
Be interesting to see how people approach the Steam box or Steam machines or whatever they end up being called from that kind of perspective. Because the operating system and the hardware specs, so they're all open.
Yeah.
So the equivalent of a dev kit is potentially going down to your local computer store and buying a few parts.
Well, it's a USB flash stick away.
All right, yeah.
Is it a flash stick? 'Cause as far as I know, the whole dev kit is just a download. Like, it's just that you just clone it from Git and you just run with it.
Yeah, exactly. But an awful lot of platforms, something like Mac, you'd have to fiddle to just make a flash disk, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's always fun hearing about people who worked on Mac stuff before me and saying, you'd be shocked how many people work on Hackintoshes professionally.
Oh yeah.
Which I'll admit to having done that before, but there's a shocking number of people who do iOS development with a Hackintosh. I'm like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Because like simulators for any phone are like terribly slow. Like the Android simulator is like notoriously takes like 5 minutes to boot.
At least it's got a nice handy resume state, so once you booted it once, it's a few seconds.
Oh, maybe
on the next load. Yeah.
So Flibit, is there anything you have coming up that you're in a position to talk about?
Oh, let's see. Because I just shipped Rogue Legacy. Let's see. Blueberry Garden is still kind of in limbo. Just basically, like, it's like one of those things where there was probably like a bug or something in there, but it's been done for like a year now. But it's one of those things where there's no really good opportunity to release it, or it's like the reason it really didn't ship in the first place is because it was originally on Monogame 2.5. It was so bad. Like textures were in the wrong place, and just like things that just did not make sense. The upstream Monogame has fixed that, but in like May 2012, Monogame was so unusable. So Blueberry Garden will be out. We'll call it Valve time soon.
Were you working on that before Waveform?
That was actually a couple months after Waveform.
Okay. I knew it was really early.
Yeah, it was pretty early, but Waveform was that was the thing that I figured, I'll just do that for a summer and that'll be it, and I'll go back to school.
Huh.
Other than that, I can comfortably say that I'm working on like 4 titles simultaneously right now. Actually, is that true? It could be between 4 and 6. It depends on how well these last 2 go. And then 2014 is going to slow down tremendously because I'm working on a massive project rather than like 6 small projects. And then I'll probably, whenever Citizens Code is like slowing down, I'll probably look at that.
Yeah.
Because like I've worked on projects before where the code, the game was not shipped yet, so the code was moving like at like lightning speed. So it was like, all right, I'm gonna trip, especially on like Subversion, where I'm just gonna trip all over their diffs. So it's like maybe I should just wait a little longer.
So from a porting perspective, what makes a title small and what makes a title big?
Mostly just in the work, because the thing is, once a game is at a position to be portable, it's very simple. Like most XNA versions, most XNA games, now that I have Monogame SCL2 working at the stage that I wanted it, most of those end up being pretty small, unless they need a new feature. Like you'll notice on my GitHub account, I have an entire re-implementation of the exact engine. Like I'm doing a whole rewrite, including the interpretation of the binary files, which are entirely undocumented. So that's like one of the bigger projects where I have to either redo the content pipeline or redo an entire component of an engine, which for like an actual engine is very rare, but for like a library like XNA, it's like I have no choice. There's one project like that where the timetable is about 6 months. I started Monogame SDL2 or SDL2 Sharp in April, and since then I've shipped about 8. So it's not going to be like that in 2014.
And going sort of way back to something that we should have asked right at the beginning, Ryan, what sort of stuff did you do before founding Eden Industries?
Actually, even when I founded Eden Industries, which was like May 2010, so this is that's about I'd already been working on Waveform for about a year, but even during that whole time, I was working at Next Level Games here in Vancouver, working first on Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, and then after that, Luigi's Mansion: Dark Moon, and then
contrast.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, very, very different. But even before that, I was at Silicon Knights working on a few games there before it kind of started declining. If you've read any of that kind of drama. And then actually before that, when I was still in school, still in university, I got like a year-long kind of co-op position at Next Level working on Fire Strikers Charged and then Spider-Man Friend or Foe. So by the time I had founded Eden Industries, I was working on Waveform. I had worked on like 5 or 6 mainstream titles already. So
you go slightly more in depth on a recent podcast, don't you? Sup Holmes.
Yeah.
So I'll link that in
Okay.
for people who want to know a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how do you find the difference between working on that kind of stuff and working on the stuff you've done for Eden?
I mean, the short answer is, I mean, they're both really good, but in very different ways. So making my own games, the creative freedom of that is amazing. And, being able to make games, like I said, mentioned in the case of Citizens of Earth, I had that idea for years, even before I worked on Waveform, that idea was kicking around. And so to kind of finally go through my archive of game designs, pull one out and be like, okay, this is one I'll make now. I mean, that's crazy. And, to be able to have, people join the team and support that vision and then put it out there and have, people, respond so well that, having so much fun with it, like that is just an unbelievable experience and opportunity to be able to do that. But at the same time, it is a ton of work, I have to do so many different things. Like I was kind of mentioning, like I do, programming and design, I manage the team. I actually I make all the particle effects for Waveform and Citizens of Earth, which I have no artistic ability, but somehow I'm doing that because no one else, I don't know, is doing it. So it would fall through the cracks. So because I'm kind of the founder, I guess it just falls on me. And trying and possibly failing with PR marketing, kind of get the word of the game out there, and at the end of the day too, I mean, it kind of lives or dies on, my decisions in a lot of ways. And so there's a ton of pressure there. So it's, it's an intense high, I guess, in a sense, but it's also intense lows trying to manage all those expectations and manage all that work. Whereas working in a mainstream job, you kind of have your little box, on Luigi's Mansion, Dark Moon, I was doing the AI for the ghosts. So it's that was my box. And I just, I make that really good. And I just trust that, the other 70 or however many people working on the game, that they're just doing their thing. And I don't really have to worry about that. I just, trust that they're capable, professional people. They're going to get their stuff done. At the end of the day, we're going to put it together and it's going to be great. And, that kind of isolation is, in retrospect, now having done all this stuff for Eden, is very nice in the sense that you don't have to worry about every detail across the whole project. I just have to worry about my little area. And of course, back then I was also getting paid, which was very nice. I did have to work a lot of unpaid overtime, but I mean, that's the game industry for you. Whereas I guess now any overtime I put in is sort of for myself, which is, I guess, a bit nicer.
It probably feels more like an investment, hey?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. So, like I said, I mean, long story short, there's really great things about both, but I mean, obviously the fact that I've quit that and I'm doing this now, I guess would show that my primary interest is in making my own games, despite the positive stuff of a mainstream development.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's great to be able to take those ideas that you've had building up over time and you bring them into reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's the case with a lot of people who make games, a lot of designers or developers. I'm sure they have just huge treasure troves of ideas they want to get to, and I mean, the probably obvious but unfortunate truth is that my archive of game designs is growing way faster than it's shrinking. Right, shrink by one every couple of years, and it grows by I don't know, a dozen a year or something. So. But of course, that's to be expected. But yeah, it's great just to be able to pick even a couple out of there and say that I've made them. That's amazing.
And there is definitely not enough time in the universe to
No.
make all the things.
Yeah, and I think that's another part of the reason why I'm trying to push this vision of this garden of indie, because I mean, yeah, if I was just saying look, I, Ryan, am going to direct a game every 2 to 3 years, and that will be my contribution to the gaming world, there is, a certain limit to how far that can go. But if I go, and if I, kind of partner and share with a lot of people and help them get their games out there, it's I feel that I'm contributing to so much more, and it's not just about me, but it's helping other people, get their games out there. And I don't know, it just feels much more grand than if I just, I don't know, like a dictator say, this is the game I'm working on now, and then right after that, this is my decision. I mean, I guess there is some fun to be had in that too, but yeah, I'm hoping to try to go a bit more distributed, I guess, with the whole thing.
So for anybody who is interested in the idea of the Garden of Indie, how does someone get involved?
They could email me, ryan@edenindustries.ca, tweet me, Facebook, there's a lot of ways to get in contact with me, but serious inquiries only, please. Making a game is really, really hard. it's not that I don't want to, I'm not willing to chat with people, but at the same time, it's like, there is some sense like, hey, are you willing to spend the next 2 years of your life giving up your evenings and weekends to work on something? If so, well, okay, that's what you have to do. If not, I mean, it's probably, game development may not be for you, or at least in this kind of style that I'm doing, which is, I mean, obviously you can make Flash games, those kind of things pretty quick, but kind of the way I've been going down and the way I've built the tech is kind of for the larger, bigger commitment style kind of thing. So
maybe I'm just digging back into like the really early days of that. I remember there was like a university that was a partner in that.
Yeah. So the guy that is doing the Android port is I mean, let me think now. At the time, so the Android port of Waveform was like his final project at the school here in Vancouver called the British Columbia Institute of Technology. So I think now he's actually working somewhere else and kind of still doing Waveform as like the culmination of his final project before graduation or something like that. So yeah, I was working with that student, and I'm definitely open to more of that. Like, I got my start as a student working at Next Level Games, so I'm really open to partnering with more students and more types of stuff like that. So I'd love to do kind of more of those types of partnerships and help kind of like budding young game developers as I once was.
Yeah, like the Waveform inquiry, like I'm sure I have the email archive somewhere of how many people I emailed, but like I was like, well, I gotta do something for the summer, but I'd rather do something that like matters. So let's just try this game thing for a try. Like the whole student thing, I think I brushed that under the swept that under the rug when I was actually emailing people. But I was like, I think at the time I was sending out my tech demo, which I actually worked with Cheese on. He did the graphics for like that old audio tech demo that showed like live processing audio where I just remember working on that thing because that was what I was doing before, other than student stuff, was like trying to make my own games, and like that was tough.
Yeah.
And getting Josh to do the art was seeing like the management of art and all that stuff is always interesting, which is why I like being able to, it's like even though I'm working on independent games, I do have that box where it's like I just have to worry about making sure that the code works, whereas it's like if art, it's like almost every port I've ever done, if you want to like look at the content folders, there's a good chance I just stole it from the Steam version on Windows. Like that's how uninvolved I am with the art.
I was just gonna say it's kind of the opposite for me. Is like I consider myself a game developer, and my challenge is like always finding time to be able to work on stuff because gotta keep a roof over my head, right? But then I come onto little projects and other bits and pieces where I end up getting shoved into the art box, and it's interesting to just kind of be able to play around in there without having to be concerned about how other aspects of the game are shaping up.
Yeah, I tried art like when I was like we're talking, oh god, it's been like 10 years. Like I'm starting to get old. Somehow working in every aspect, because like when I did audio, because I was already technically inclined, even though I've only been programming for like 3, maybe 4 years. Like working in, it's weird seeing both sides because it definitely is like a two-sided thing. The only time I've ever seen it like merge well was Humble Hearts. They did Dust and Lizzie and Tail, which like it's one of those games I found because everybody keeps telling me to port it. So it's like, all right, I'll look at it. And it turns out this one guy did the art and the code by himself over a period of like 4 years or something.
Nice.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then as for and this thing is also interesting because like I tried early on in my porting thing, like everybody kept asking me like, how do I port games? So I figured I would start like a program to try and do that, and trying to make it work for people has been interesting for the same reason that like as Ryan mentioned with the serious inquiries only, because like when I tell them are you ready to work 60 hours a week minimum to get this booting, let's not even get into debugging, and then it like kind of flops. So it's kind of interesting. It's like everybody could work on a game.
Yeah. Working on games isn't like super fun, like playing them? Well, what?
Well, the funny thing is like only like towards like that's like if you put it in like a 2-year span, that part comes like the last 2 months when it's supposed to be gold.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
Only in rare exceptions.
So one last question for the both of you, I guess, is do you find that when something doesn't go right, when a project tanks, do you find that makes it harder to move on to the next project, or does it kind of provide you with the incentive to really knuckle under and focus on whatever's next on the horizon?
That's a really good question, because like I've had like a tremendous project flop before, and because the thing is, it'll tank and you'll be discouraged, and the thing is sometimes you'll kind of like want to move on to the next thing, so you can not be thinking about the last thing so much, but at the same time it's like, well, why did it fail? I'd like to go back and try and fix it, but do I really want to put myself through that mindset over and over again? It's kind of trying to not completely ignore what you did in the past, because then it just feels like you'll probably just keep making flops because you're not like paying attention to what you're doing. You don't want to like dwell on it too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, yeah, it is a really good question. I think there is some element to, the reason why I wanted to make my own games was to make my own games. And, if it's a failure or if it's successful, I mean, I still want to make my own games, so even if I had a big flop, I'd be like, well, I didn't necessarily, create Eden Industries to become a billionaire, the primary reason was to make my own games. But I think, that being said, so even with something like Waveform, which, I think was a much greater critical success than a commercial success, financially, I would have been better off still working at Nice Little Games, at a mainstream job, just given how much effort I'd put into that game over like a 2.5, almost 3-year period of time. But at the same time, at the end of the day, I mean, it was received very well by people who played it, by critics. It was a finalist in a number of awards and stuff. So I think, like Flibit was saying, I mean, there's some aspect of, looking at, what the project was with kind of, just an honest perspective and see what went well and see what went wrong. And I'm sure even games that are wild successes, I'm sure you could still find things to learn from it, to do better in the future. So, for me personally, it really is like Waveform was a game that I felt was very unique, but I consciously didn't put some things in that, and same with Citizens, like that people want. Like, I mean, I know some developer friends of mine that like when a character dies in their game, it's a big explosion of blood, and the people are like, everyone loves that when I show them the game. And it's like, well, maybe so, but I'm still not going to put blood explosions in Citizens of Earth, even if it would somehow help sales or things like that. Like, I'm still going to stick to the vision I have for the games, whether success or failure. Except that, I am married, and so I think at some time my wife, like, I don't know, I feel like I have to do something like reasonably successful to the point where like I can still maintain, support a family. So I can't just kind of like whittle away doing my own thing forever with no conception of like the people around me, I guess. But
right.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of rolls back to the definition of success as well, where it's like, if it doesn't, if it's critically okay, and it's like what you wanted to make, then
I think it does shape things a bit too. Like, I mean, if Waveform was like a runaway success, maybe to this day I'd still be making content for it.
All right, cool.
And new levels and ports and that kind of thing. But it got to the point where it's like, well, it was good for what it was, but there didn't seem to be a lot of like financial demand, I suppose, for all that new content. So I'll go work on something else and just kind of let that one sleep for a little bit until maybe sometime in the future. So
cool. So before we wrap up the interview portion and move on to the rest of our content, is there anything else that you guys want to say to our listeners?
Well, thanks it was great being able to chat, and if you want to support the Citizens of Earth Kickstarter in the last couple of days, that'd be very much appreciated. Or just following the game and checking it out is even appreciated. Even if you don't back it, I appreciate you looking and just even taking the time to watch a video or whatever. So yeah.
Is there a Linux demo at this point?
Not yet.
There's no Linux demo, no.
I haven't seen the Citizens code yet, so I haven't been able. And like right now, it's like this is considered my lunch break. Like I'm sort of in like the holiday crunch at the moment. So
do we know if it runs in wine? I'm assuming it does.
It pretty much is like Waveform, and it also is on SDL, so it's very comfortable in a wine setup.
Oh, okay. Well, good to know. I didn't know that it works on wine, so that's good. Yeah.
Sweet. So Linux users can still take a peek at the demo that's there.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Flibit?
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah, go pledge for Citizens, because this is like this is the real first Kickstarter that I've been partially affiliated with from the beginning. So it's kind of been interesting to see it still on the outside, but knowing kind of the inside. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to summarize a little bit where I'd like to see it, because it's something, especially with the Earthbound thing, because like everybody loves that game, and I will admit to have never played it, and it's like maybe a modern look at it will get me to actually dig up a copy of Earthbound, because like this and Chrono Trigger are two games that everyone's like, they find out I've not played it, and I've like committed murder. So yeah, I'd like to see more stuff like this.
So Ryan, before we move on, are there any post-Kickstarter plans for Citizens of Eden?
Of Earth?
Of Earth. that you're comfortable talking about?
Yeah, I mean, in general, we're still working on the game, actively. I mean, during the whole Kickstarter, after the Kickstarter, we're still planning on working on it. So, for anyone who really likes it, but is maybe, scared of the result because of the Kickstarter, I mean, they don't have to worry. Like, we are still continuing active development. So the game is going to be shipped and released at some point. So certainly post Kickstarter, I mean, it will be kind of business as usual. For all of us working on the game, in that we're going to just keep on going. And there, as I mentioned kind of before, there is one very cool bit of post-Kickstarter information, but I can't talk about it. But I'm sure it'll be announced sooner or later, and it would be very cool. But you can, I guess, I don't know, sleep well at night knowing that there's cool stuff in the mix happening, I guess. But yeah.
Very intriguing.
Well, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. You are more than welcome to hang around for the rest of the cast, but if you need to duck off, you're free to leave now.
I'll probably go work on Citizens of Earth, but thanks so much for having me. It was great.
Yeah, been great having you.
No, thanks for coming.
All right, neato. I'll probably stick around. God, that keyboard is wonderful.
It sounds great, doesn't it?
I'm doing that.
It's cool.
The sound of a mechanical keyboard is soothing.
So yeah, moving on to SteamLUG community stuff, we're probably going to skim over some of this. John, did you want to talk about the Dota 2 event we recently had?
Yeah, as always, I tend to forget what I've got installed before an event happens, so I was a little late, so I missed the first game. But it was myself, Swordfisher, Neomoda, Darksim, Akko, Bizadef, who's a newbie to the group, Future Suitor, another new person I didn't recognise, and Sukarambo.
Nice.
And we had 2 games, and I did appallingly in both of them. I don't know what I was doing.
It's how Dota works.
I know, I'm missing something clearly. I play the game and I lose and I'm like, what did I do wrong? And then clearly I just don't absorb it. But yeah, I want to play it more. I'm terrible at it. I didn't get into the Left 4 Dead 2 event, did you at all, Cheese?
No, I had a lot of other stuff on and wasn't really able to make it, unfortunately.
Yep, same problem again. I've been trying to manage my hard disk just to get some free space. So basically uninstalled most of my library, and whenever we've had an event, it's popped up and I've gone, damn, that's the one thing I don't have installed. And I did that with TF2 last week, and yeah, it's ridiculous. But hopefully, I'll sort that out for the next couple of events. And we've actually been looking at booking some, haven't we, Cheese?
Yeah, so coming up later this month as we record, we've got Planetary Annihilation on the horizon, which has been requested by a couple of people.
Myself included.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it. Oh, yeah.
Does that feature multiplayer at the moment?
Yeah.
It should, because it's kind of an RTS.
Okay, I didn't know. I thought it was just a single-player campaign.
Well, yeah, it should be. Because I remember, that's the reason I ended up getting it, both for that and because they were doing some Linux debugging. I was like, let's see what happens. And then I open up the libraries and I go, nope. Yeah, I'm actually really excited to actually play that thing, because it's super cool from a technical standpoint. I don't know how it plays, and I'm terrible at RTS, but hey, virtual textures, that'll be fun.
But yeah, there's tournaments and stuff running now, so it's got multiplayer.
Okay. It'd be nice if someone could stream that.
It's still I think the beta is still $60, so if you're looking for a quick buy, then why not?
Yeah, and to preempt any ranting or raving about that, that's the tier at which the crowdfunding campaign offered beta support, so they're kind of maintaining that price that was set originally way back at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think we had a discussion about that sort of in the second episode or something.
Oh yeah, we did too. So yeah, we've got Planetary Annihilation, which hopefully is going to go well. We also have Legends of Aetherius, which a couple of people have asked for.
Aetherius,
however people want to pronounce it.
Yeah.
What is it? I recognize the name. I don't know what it is.
It's sort of like an MMO, isn't it?
Sounds like it.
I don't know.
Swordfish is quite into it, so I've left it to him to talk about normally.
Yeah, I don't have it either.
Okay.
But it's got a guy in armor on the picture, I think. So it's medieval themed, if I'm understanding correctly.
Anything with legends in it.
I think when they had a sort of an open beta, I tried it and it had a random crashing bug after a couple of minutes and didn't get back in. But that's unfortunate. That was many months ago, though.
And looking ahead, we're also talking about having a impromptu Worms match after we finish with the cast here. But looking into next month, Natural Selection 2 looks like it's in better shape, so we'll look at scheduling some events there. We're probably going to look at having some more Left 4 Dead 2, especially after some recent updates, which now enable microphone support and fix a couple of crash cases, which is really positive. And we completely forgot to schedule a Brutal Legend Rocktober event for this month, so maybe we'll have a late Rocktober and do something next month.
We might always just try and fit it in next weekend or something. I mean,
I guess TF2 is that still a regular thing?
Yeah, we still regularly do TF2.
yeah.
Yes, I guess there'll be some Halloween stuff for that, since I guess have they always done that?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I should have done that as well. Wow, I completely forgot.
Yeah, they tend to swap in those two maps, don't they?
Yeah, well, they normally add a new map every time, so I think they're up to 3 or 4 now.
Well, then that's something else to think about.
I've been so busy fixating on getting Costume Quest happening in October for Game Club that I just didn't think at all about SteamLUG events.
Killing Floor tends to do Halloween stuff as well, so
Oh yeah?
maybe we can consider that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe there's some scope for doing some midweek stuff there, because I've already filled up all the weekend slots.
Okie doke.
Other community stuff that's going on, we've migrated the SteamLUG website over to GitHub, so people are now free to submit pull requests if they're interested. Epitron added dynamic show note highlighting as you listen to the cast on the website, which is super nice.
Yep, thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks heaps. That's a really nice addition to have, so if anybody's excited, check that out.
Yeah, I mean, the initial plan with doing the show notes so verbosely is to be able to fit that in at some point in the future, and it's I'm so grateful that someone did that work rather than myself doing it.
Yeah, and having the ability to click on an item, click on the timestamp for an item in the show notes, and have the audio jump to that position. That's fantastic.
Oh yeah, and of course now we've got target links, so we can actually share a specific time with people, which is brilliant.
Yeah,
and it's going to help with our guest interviews. So yeah.
At the moment, I think you got to type those URLs in directly. I don't think we've got an actual link that you can right-click on and copy.
Yeah, they're not clickable just yet. We've got to change a few things, but a pull request for that would also be very welcome.
We'll get to it soon if nobody else beats us to it.
Yeah, and of course people will probably find out how we do some of the stuff we do on the server, so eek.
Yeah, it's back to that, my code is ugly thing, hey.
It's all good.
We have, in the SteamLUG group, interesting thread where somebody's asking for people's opinions and experiences comparing AMD and NVIDIA performance under Linux, which has been nice to see people offering their thoughts there.
What's the general sentiment of the thread? Because I saw you posted on it, but I skimmed it without really taking it all in.
Well, it seems to be sort of what most people generally accept as common sense, which is that the AMD open source drivers are stronger, but than the NVIDIA open source drivers, but the NVIDIA proprietary drivers seem to give the best stability and performance for people. But it's interesting to see the way that people are sort of relaying their personal experience over the top of that.
Yeah, that's good. And of course, AMD have been getting better over the last year, so it would be nice if at one point in the future people aren't, bringing this up.
It's not an issue. Yeah.
These things work. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be fantastic to see. This month, I published a review of Assault Android Cactus, which I may have mentioned the past couple of casts, and we're also talking with one of the developers from Witchbeam about getting them to join us for a future cast, so that can be fun as well. You had a chance to read that at all, John?
We did talk about that in depth quite a few casts ago, didn't we? It was the female battling robots, was it?
Yeah. I think I went into a bit more depth in my article, as my articles do.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah. You've been playing that like incessantly lately. I've been seeing it on my log.
He certainly has.
Jesus is now playing Assault Android Cactus again.
Well, I'm like halfway through writing, and I want to double check something, or I want to look at how something behaves, and so I hop back in. It's funny, the article itself isn't that long, so far as my articles go, but I feel like I did.
I still expect that to be a couple of thousand words at least.
Well, yeah, he's already. I mean, it's standard enough article. But like when I look at my friends list, you're always playing that game.
But I feel like I did way more research and way more. I played and looked for a lot more while I was playing than I ended up being able to put into the article once I edited it down. But it's heaps of fun. I really enjoyed it. It was not a chore at all to play that amount. And as new content gets added to the Steam Early Access build, and as we get closer to release, I imagine you guys are going to see me playing it a little bit more.
So, for the last Double Fine Game Club, you had an interview. Do you want to tell us about
Well,
that?
yeah. So sometimes we have developers join us for Game Club and talk with us. When we did The Cave earlier in the year, I did about an hour-long voice interview with Ron Gilbert, relaying questions from the chat, and it was kind of cool. We did the
Who's that?
Ron Gilbert, the guy that made Monkey Island and Maniac Mansion and Death Spank and other sorts of things. Considered to be one of the kind of very core people in the lineage of adventure games. It's I got to meet him as well earlier this year, which was
Yes, he's
really
quite the
nice.
legend.
He is. It's fantastic.
Yeah, him and Tim.
Yeah. They both worked on the first Monkey Island together, which is kind of nice.
Yep.
And the second, I guess, on some levels. Yeah, so we had Tasha Harris, who was the lead developer for Costume Quest when she was working at Double Fine. She's now lead franchise artist at Pixar. She worked at Pixar before going to Double Fine and then went back afterwards.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Is she the person that came up with the prototype that they accepted to make this game? Is that it?
Yes. So she did that during the
Cool.
second Amnesia fortnight, I think, which meant that it was something they all kind of had an idea of what to expect. And she said she didn't really expect going into it that she would be leading a game design. It was kind of this whole let's throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. There weren't really any expectations about where it was going to go from there.
Well, she did well then, because I played that on PS3 when it came out, and then bought it again on PC to play it. So yeah.
I'm playing through it at the moment. I hadn't actually completed it before, so I'm kind of trying to keep up with playing it through as we play for Game Club, and I'm really enjoying it. We don't really do Halloween; it's not really a thing here in Australia, but I don't feel like that's really excluding me from having fun with the game much.
No, apart from possibly carving a pumpkin, we don't really do much here either.
No, we go all out. Half of us celebrate it in October, and half of us celebrate it in November when candy's on discount.
Wow.
In November, my diet just becomes exclusively Twix and Skittles.
Twix, brilliant.
Yes.
The next national holiday is the 5th of November for me, and everyone should know that from V for Vendetta, which is a bit of a perversion from it, but we like our bonfires then and our fireworks.
But yeah, so a transcript for that interview is up if anybody's interested in having a read.
Right, so on to Steam and Valve news. The client has had quite a few beta updates in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Constantly pushing out little tweaks to big picture, some Linux handling. So what are the specifics? The game client should better track games that are using launcher scripts, which, they're not as popular now since they've added in some extra support. But it means that I think Amnesia was one of the games that was loading a launcher, and then Steam would forget that it's actually running the game, so you'd never be online in the game or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Most of the other work has been in big picture and all the stuff that related to like SteamOS, so in-client streaming of games from other machines on your network, and SteamDB, a website we use quite a bit to find out when Flibit's ports are going to get released. Have been doing quite a bit of research and just poking around, and they actually found it. The new client has actually got a web server built into it that you can enable that's used for remote control, which is a bit weird when it's not too clear what it's for at the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, that aspect. I mean, I guess it makes it easier for you to interact with the interface for Steam remotely. And it sounds like this is a bit of an extension of some of the remote Steam management that we've seen in the Steam website, where you can buy a game and then set it to remotely install on a machine that's running.
Yeah, as I've added in a note here, I honestly wonder if they're trying to migrate to web-based apps on iOS and Android, and this will be a method of being able to interface with Steam on your desktop and do it all locally rather than having to go out and talk to the Steam servers and the rest. And there are functions that let you navigate the interface and get lists of sort of your current game library and the rest. And they're still fleshing it out, but it'll be worth watching that. Another change actually removed Samba support, because they've been looking at adding music support for different content like iTunes, Spotify, and the rest. But it looks like Samba and iTunes got removed. I don't know whether that's just because they haven't finished them or it's gone for good, but we'll have to see.
I hope that they continue to keep Samba, but I guess on some levels I can understand if they're planning to say you can only stream music across your local network from a machine that is running Steam, and that provides all of the streaming stuff for you.
Yeah, it's this sort of balance they've got to strike. Android's got the same problem. Its default media support is pretty terrible, but when you add Google Music on top, it's a whole lot better. And Google are reluctant to sort of make the platform a lot better, because then it would undermine the usefulness of their own music system, which is frustrating, really.
Yeah, it would be nice. And I don't know, Valve often have seemed to prioritize users' interests over other interests. So hopefully we'll see that kind of prioritization of user experience over the interests of whatever music streaming partners they've got set up.
Yeah, and I think apparently Alrum was looking at codecs, and the client now ships with an X264 codec for the game streaming, and I think it should have Vorbis and MP3 support for audio, and we know that at least. So I do wonder what's going to happen to some of the sort of the FLAC soundtracks on Steam, whether they're going to stop selling them, or what's going to happen. How are Valve going to encourage all these developers to sort of shift to different codecs depending on what SteamOS is going to support?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it would be fantastic if we could see developers shifting to more cross-platform codecs. That could be really positive.
Yes.
We could do it. The thing is, this is the musician coming in, being someone who's an entertainment industry musician formerly, where it's the only distributor I've ever seen do well in terms of all the formats and stuff is Bandcamp. Bandcamp basically says, you give me WAV files and we're going to do every format.
It's great,
and you don't even have a say. It says, you give us the raw data and we make every format, all of them. Not an option.
Because when you go download, it's like FLAC, Vorbis, AAC. It's really good. And at some point, I expect them to do Opus.
Right, and it's I think the thing is, the problem with the soundtrack system is that most people, when they think about soundtracks for Steam, they're thinking it through the hacky way that we do it, which is basically we just take a depot, put the soundtrack in, and then we just kind of publish it on Steam.
Yeah.
Whereas there's no standardized method to actually do video. Even films, there's a bunch of movies on Steam now, where it's you just basically just download a thing that runs it, sort of.
Well, Indie Game the Movie is an executable that loads a video, which is really daft.
So yeah, if they want to add media support to Steam, they probably need to actually make a standard system for it. And when it comes to soundtracks in various formats, they will probably have to address this as well. And if they want to do soundtracks well, they may as well just straight up copy Bandcamp. They do it beautifully.
But I mean, if they were going to do this, you would have thought that SteamDB would have noticed some of the sort of changes, because the way it's structured, you would have had soundtrack and movie as an app type, but it's not in there yet. So if that, if it was being planned, they're getting a bit behind, because if this is coming up soon, probably likely next year, you would have thought they'd be making some changes already for it. So
well, it's not. The thing is, I don't really know how adding new formats like that would affect it. The thing is, that's a different feature for Steam altogether. So if they're just trying to just create a system based on what they already have with Steam already, then music and video, that's a whole different project. But I mean, once that's in, it's not too hard.
No, it's sort of what they need to do is detach depots, soundtrack depots, to be a different type, and they also need to look at, because the problem at the moment is quite a lot of game soundtracks are flagged as DLC, so that means you can't actually buy them unless you're in the game. Which for someone who likes soundtracks but doesn't want to buy all the games, it's a bit weird that you have that dependency. And of course, it also hides.
Right, that's the thing. Is that when you do this. It's basically when you have that new subsystem for different types of media, that will affect it. Whereas it's like the tools in the tools section of Steam, where instead of having to download the game, you just get the tool. So in this case, you just get the music or the video.
Yeah.
And they actually have a video subsystem already, if you think about it. It's just that nobody uses it because it's all for trailers.
Well, that's the thing. They've also been mass converting their Flash-based trailers on the actual store that isn't part of the actual Steam database to WebM. So they've actually got all these WebM files that are served from their content system for the trailers that open when you go to a game page. But then they've got all the trailers that are currently on Steam that are in any format whatsoever, because they've just let people upload video, and then They can have fun going through all of that and tidying up, because the last couple of months they've been tidying the data up, tagging games with developer and all this other stuff that has just shown in big picture that developers don't really set an awful lot of their own metadata to their games correctly.
Well, it's because you have to do it all manually.
Yes, but again, you think all of this workflow they would, look into rolling out now that they're getting so much more through Greenlight.
Well, the funny thing is that they're automating some of it, but not all of it. Like when the famous 0 byte download for Linux, that's been fixed because they were able to put it up to the front end and automate a lot of it, which is great. But but the thing about a Steam release is that there's so much data. There's so much data. Like, it's ridiculous. So trying to automate all of that or require all of it somehow is like, I don't know. It depends on a lot of it falls on the game maintainer, and sometimes that just it's just so painful.
Seeing when a game like Painkiller, when the beta goes live, and some people can't download it at all, and they've got to then contact Valve, and Valve has to look into it, and sometimes it looks like they've not tagged the depot correctly, and some of those changes can be done directly by Valve rather than the developer doing it. It's really rather complicated, and I don't know how they've got into this state, really.
Sometimes it's just permissions on certain things. Like sometimes subscriptions get made, but they weren't by the developer, so it doesn't show up in their account. Or it's like, but most of it's like if you have the subscription because you only have one, and you just mark it for Linux and then add the depot, then it's done. But yeah, so there's like minor edge cases, but they've fixed a lot of it,
which is good news.
So moving on, what's been happening on GitHub?
It's been mostly quiet because we haven't seen new games. We still get the odd reports for... Someone's been quite persistent about reporting Half-Life Deathmatch bugs that got introduced with the Orange Box update. And, they've listed about 30 bugs. And then they post another bug that says, when are you going to get around to fixing all these that I've reported?
Ah, lovely.
So I have to politely just say, I appreciate you reporting these bugs, but some of them are they're now features. And, I was a bit more diplomatic in the post, and I explained, why they've been tagged the way they have, but it's really not even up to me, and Valve hasn't said anything, so can't do anything. As for Linux...
And reporting it's enough.
Yeah, exactly.
When you don't need to make new issues to ask when stuff's going to be dealt with.
An awful lot of these they've been lost in the Steam forums for so long that I don't think any of Valve have actually noticed them. But, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, one interesting thing came up yesterday. I was on Twitter, and CoStar, a fairly famous Minecraft YouTuber, mentioned that he went to install Steam for Linux and then discovered, it's Steam for Ubuntu, because he's on CentOS. And of course you go, oh no, CentOS. It's probably the worst sort of gaming distro, so yeah. But quite a lot of it's down to just some of these distros are shipping such old libraries, glibc, that, how do you reconcile all of that?
And that is the point of distros like CentOS and Debian as well, I guess, is that it's only software versions that have been mature for a long time and have proven themselves to be reliable and stable make it in. They're not the cutting edge fast release distros. They're specifically shipping older stuff.
Well, they are the true long-term support distros. For something like Ubuntu's 12.04, I've had quite a few bugs with it where it stopped booting because I've done an update and it's just broken itself. So if that's the best that Ubuntu can do, then I'd actually consider going to CentOS. But, I do actually like gaming.
I don't know. Ever since I started using Linux, I picked Fedora and I love it. I haven't changed it.
I was on Fedora from Fedora Core 4 up to 12, I think it was, and I just, hopped onto Ubuntu just to try it out. And, just the SE Linux issues alone make me a happy person on Ubuntu. That's all, really. I have Fedora on my server, you see, so I do like it.
I've been a Fedora user since the first one. What was that? Was that Yarrow? And I've played around with other distros, and I used to poke around with like Red Hat and Debian back before, but Fedora was the first like desktop distro that I had, and I really like the community, and I like the distro. I like the like the packaging policy and stuff. I like that it's a free distro. It's geared towards not having official repos for non-free stuff. That's nice for me.
Of course, it's also bleeding edge. Which,
Yeah.
Looking at the show notes, apparently Pulse Audio is too new.
Yes. Another bug that got reported was that the people on the latest Fedora have issues with liborg, that the Pulse Audio library is breaking on them, and it's Steam Runtime's designed to get around these issues, but of course you not only just have to have maintainers on that, but they have to be pretty competent at shaping all these issues, and I don't know specifically how you'd get around this. And any ideas?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. So beyond tagging it, and I can either contact Spot and see if he could fix it or something, but it might be something he can't because Fedora is so up to date with upstream.
I do hope that that at some point, and I hope that at some point we move to a point where Valve are comfortable pushing the Steam runtime as being a slower updating, longer term thing, where users of maybe Debian can expect to have reliable performance and reliable compatibility. I really would hate to see Steam limited to the cutting edge distros where there's more chance of stuff breaking, because it's going to result in fewer positive user experiences for people moving across for the first time.
I don't know. It's hard for me to say because I've never really, even with Debian, I'm like, well, nowadays Debian unstable, which quote unquote unstable, it's on libc 215. I think it's on libc 217 now, which I'm on 215. I'm like, all right, look. At this point, the 215 is my base. At this point, there's no excuse. Unless you're I'm planning on getting a CentOS box at some point, but that's just, first of all, there's, perks to having a server, but I guess I can now use that as a case to stretch glibc compatibility. But really, it's I don't know, we're, Valve and I are on 215, and we're pretty happy with it.
Yeah, for sure. But like you say, Unstable's got 17 at the moment, and, is the question going to be, is the runtime gonna stay targeting 215, or is it gonna move up to something newer before the older distros have caught up to that, or the slower release distros have caught up?
It wouldn't surprise me if it jumps up again for nearer the release of SteamOS, because if they can get performance increases by just updating to later libraries, they will.
Yeah,
it'll probably stick with LTS releases.
Yeah,
and maybe once SteamOS is out and Valve are sort of presumably actively supporting a distro, maybe that'll become the point at which they try and stay fairly stable and not change things too much.
Yeah, mostly just hangs on. They'll probably just want to do with LTS stuff because I've dealt with I actually just recently dealt with how they do distro packaging and what they want to stick with, and it's they're basically taking an LTS thing and then pulling what they want. That's pretty much the extent of what they want to do, and anything more than that is they have SteamOS, but for actual they probably don't want to maintain an actual distro. They just want to maintain something on top of it. So when it comes to a lower level stuff, they're just gonna pull what they absolutely need from LTS and nothing else, which is what I would do.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that reduces the amount of distro-specific idiosyncrasies that SteamOS is going to have. It's going to potentially reduce the amount of direct support that they're going to need to offer if everything's kind of more or less identical to upstream.
There's not much to say other than look, you got to update your Debian Etchbox. It's going to happen one of these days.
Exactly.
But moving on, the Steam Developer Days stuff.
Ooh, the fact they came out and said, "Hey, developers, come here, see what we've got." That's exciting, isn't it?
It's interesting that they announced it as publicly as they did, because it's mostly it's a private event and it's no press event, which is fair, the latter thing. But then when it comes to how public it is, it's interesting. I know it's still strictly invite only.
Yep, invite only. They say off the record, but apparently they're going to be recording some of the talks or something.
Yeah.
So I think at the moment they're going for full PR of everything because they want to get people talking about it.
Yeah.
Over the past couple of weeks with the Planetary Annihilation guys, they've had the Payday developers visit over to Seattle to play with the controllers. I mean, they are definitely going to all their developers on the platform and, hey, look at this, this is what's coming up. We're going to talk to you about Linux, how you can port to it. And I assume that's what this will be about.
Yeah, it seems like they're going to be talking about these kinds of technologies the FAQ mentions VR and game economies and user-generated content and stuff. So it sounds like maybe kind of a end-to-end of the types of things that Valve think the industry needs to pay more attention to, or innovate on, or keep an eye on. Yeah. But I imagine that the big news coming out of it will be people's impressions of SteamOS and the Steam controller. I imagine that's what everybody's going to fixate on.
Yeah, all the talk's going to be about the controller first, the console, in quotes, second, because everyone's still thinking Steambox and everything. I think everything else, all this sort of how bad's OpenGL, people are just going to forget to ask because it's boring technical stuff.
Yeah, I know. It'd just be interesting to see what comes out of it. I don't have any kind of hunches either way at this point. But then I haven't paid a lot of attention either. So we just had a whole stack of Greenlight titles go live. There were 37 titles all up, and 18 of which supported Linux or are promising to offer some kind of Linux support, which, as far as, again, I haven't been paying enough attention, but I think that's the highest ratio we've ever seen out of Greenlight.
It certainly feels like it. That's a definite swing. I mean, when we discussed the 100 Greenlit titles, I don't remember there being this many Linux ones in it.
Right. It certainly wasn't 50.
No. But looking through it, our last cast, we had John Warner on, talking about the fall, and of course he's been greenlit.
It's fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, that came out of the blue. And also those of us who managed to get in at a high enough tier on the crowdfunding campaign there have access to the in-development build, which I've been playing through and giving John some feedback on. So I've just been chatting with him over the past couple of days, and things are moving along. A lot of promise in the prototype there. It'll be exciting to see where it goes from here.
Yep, another game we mentioned last time, Neverending Nightmares. That's also been greenlit.
Yeah.
Julia, that was the adventure game we spoke about with John. That's also been greenlit.
Yeah. Something that stands out amongst the titles is Access Game Factory, which is looks like some kind of game development framework, SDK development environment type thing, which is offering Linux support. I wasn't expecting to see that sort of thing in amongst the Greenlight titles, so it was an interesting surprise. Yeah, there's also, as far as stuff that I'd kind of been paying attention to outside of Greenlight, I think was Festa Mud was in there, which is by the guys that did the Leisure Suit Larry remake that had that Kickstarter campaign last year. I think it was last year.
Is Festa Mud a remake as well? Because I seem to remember that title from years and years and years ago. Is it a sequel or something?
So far as I'm aware, it's original IP, but there may have been like a way low res version that they did previously.
I really should have looked at that earlier.
I feel bad for not chasing this up.
Game that everyone was talking about last week just seemed to have come out of nowhere. Universum, which is... It says it's an RTS, but it's also a first-person shooter. It's sort of online with RPG elements. The developer's literally thrown everything together. It's apparently one developer working on it all, doing all the art, the audio, the code, everything. Really surprising. That's been greenlit.
I like that the cover image on the Kickstarter video shows this woman with robotic wings and some kind of rifle bow that's shooting rockets and things, and she's got a sword and is flying.
Exactly. It is literally, let's throw everything in, what will appeal to people. And you can just watch the video, and it's mad what they get through to say, hey, look, it's got this and this and this and this. It might play really well. We'll have to see, but yeah, wow.
It sounds like it's got a lot of potential to be a mess.
Possibly, but it might be like Grand Theft Auto, where you can go down one specific thing that you're interested in, and go play golf all day. Not that I think it's got golf. That's just a
for now.
PGA thing. Yeah, for now. Maybe they might have space golf or something.
So I wonder what role not Sarah Kerrigan plays in it.
I have no idea.
She features prominently on the page as well. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. Be very interesting to see how they managed to pull all that together.
So of these other titles, did we talk about Fortnightly, or was that something that we mentioned offcast?
Rings a bell.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody knows about the game, but it just took until now to get greenlit. But yeah, I mean, it had an indie game stand sale and some other things like that, but I don't know how to pronounce it.
Apparently I favorited it, but I can't remember doing that.
We're organised today.
Oh, November 2012. Yeah. Well, this is the thing, Greenlight's been around for a year now. Some of these titles have been sat waiting to get approved for ages. It's ridiculous.
It's interesting that old ones have managed to move up the ranks as new stuff has been piling in. You know, that's kind of positive that older titles can still feel like there's a possibility of getting greenlit, rather than if you've been on there for more than a certain amount of time, your chances are zero.
Right. I mean, Escapegoat was up there for a year before it got accepted, and then Escapegoat 2 got accepted with that.
Do you think that possibly was related to the fact it had all 3 platforms actively being developed?
I hope so.
In other words, is it your fault?
I don't. The funny thing is, those ports just came out for goofs. Like someone recommended me to them, and they went sure, and I just kind of ported them in that was one of those really quick weekend monogame things where I was able to quickly get it working, and then we'd had the indie game standstill for the debut. But as for that being a cause, I doubt it.
The weirdest thing is, the first time I played that game was their web version, because I think they'd ported it to HTML5.
Yeah, the JSIL compiler that Kevin Gadd's working on, that was one of the star projects of it.
That game played really well, and I was like, hey, this is kind of neat. And when you announced you were porting, I was like, hey, I could test that.
Yep. So, that and Soulcaster. And Soulcaster was never even on Greenlight in the first place, but that was one of those things where it's like, well, it's the same engine, may as well, and, we'll see what happens later on.
So the other thing that is hiding in amongst the non-Linux titles that have been greenlit are several Valve engine, source mods.
Yeah, I wonder what it's like for an indie developer to not get greenlit, and then they see that the Alien Swarm first-person mod got greenlit. I wonder what that feels like.
Yeah,
that's gotta feel kind of bad. I'll be honest.
I know that game or that mod actually sounds kind of interesting to me. But yeah, from the perspective of these guys, the amount of work that they've done and the kind of work that they've done compared to the work that a lot of indie developers have done on their own projects is, yeah.
It's more surprising that some of these are running on engines that Valve still hasn't ported to other titles. And it just feels a little premature to greenlight them now rather than sort of waiting to their, because if it is likely that Linux users like us are gonna pester these guys, hey, can you update it for Linux, please? It just feels sort of untimely. Really, I don't know.
I get the feeling that because they're getting greenlit, they're going to update to SDK 2013 just because. It's what actually it's not. Well, the thing is, I was thinking about Suicide Survival. That's one of my favorite source mods, and when the SDK came out, they were like, let's update it to SDK 2013. But some people, I imagine some people would only want to do that if there's going to be a massive audience for an SDK update, because. A team that I didn't work directly with, but I was familiar with Operation Black Mesa, whereas I remember when they were doing the Orange Buck update, apparently that was just agony. So when it comes to the 2013 up, they're probably going to want some justification for doing so.
It's the same as the Stanley Parable developers. They're having a hard time at the moment even getting their Mac version working. So
yeah, right.
Yes. But Gran has said that he really does want a Linux version of it, so we have to obviously wait for Portal 2 to be updated first. So we have that to look forward to at some point.
Yeah, fingers crossed that doesn't take too long. Although, as I was saying earlier, I'd much rather see Alien Swarm first.
Whatever.
Whatevs, man.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll be happy with either.
I don't know. I prefer the original Portal over Portal 2, and Portal 2's multiplayer.
I think most people
does
do
not have a lot of replayability.
I like them both.
That's what I think pretty much everybody's in agreement on that. Just about Portal 1 and Portal 2 co-op are fine on their own, but this Portal 2 single player was well, we get it, and then that phrase for 8 hours, just we get it.
Yeah, one of the things I really appreciated out of Portal 1 the most was its leanness, its efficiency. There was absolutely no fat. It was such an optimized and streamlined experience that I hope that it's inspired many developers to try and take a similar approach and adhere to similar kinds of production values and being willing to excise stuff that's fat. But Portal 2 is most definitely the opposite. It's enjoyable. It's probably about as good as Half-Life 2, but it's certainly nowhere near as good as 1.
It's Portal 2, but bigger. It's the Hollywood mindset. It's gotta be the last one, but bigger.
Is this the downside of...
And even, big
Is this the downside of Valve's kind of, you work on what you think is exciting for you and good for the company, kind of thing. So a small team works on Portal, that explodes, everyone is so excited, and you get a million chefs in the kitchen. Everybody stops to work on Portal 2, and you get this massive, huge thing that.
But I like Portal 2.
Oh, it's good.
I mean, it's one of those things where Yahtzee put it really well. Like, it was like the first sentence in his review. It's like, is Portal 2 good? Yes. Better than Portal 1? No.
That's the thing for me is, I enjoyed Portal 2, but if you take the first game as a benchmark, it still feels very wanting.
It's just such a shame the first one wasn't longer, and I wonder if they could possibly have just stretched the first one out a little bit.
Oh wow, I thought the length of the first one was brilliant, especially the way that if you hadn't talked to people,
I thought it was fine.
If you didn't know what was going on, the game ended up being twice as long as you thought it was going to be. Because you get to what you think is the last test chamber, and then the game turns around and goes ha ha ha, and that in itself makes it feel heaps longer than it otherwise would. I think
if you ignore all the sort of bits and bobs they added on after the radios and everything else, and you just consider the mechanism of using portals, I don't know. I went into it not knowing how long it was, and was really surprised when it ended. And I was like, I sort of wanted a game that's twice as long, and maybe that's just me.
I mean,
it felt short to me.
I felt when I was playing through, I thought it was going to stop about halfway through, and I was feeling like I would have been comfortable with a game that small. But it's definitely a short game. It's most definitely a short game.
They haven't added any sort of Steam Workshop to the first one, did they? That was all in Portal 2, wasn't it?
It would have been SDK stuff. But Portal 2's SDK is actually not bad. I mean, it's not even SDK. It's basically just a map tool, and it's great.
I wish it was collaborative.
That's something I'm really excited for, because then you get this massive expanse of user-generated content that turns something like Little Big Planet from, a lousy platformer to this massively playful and interesting pool that you can, sink hours and hours and hours into.
Yeah, I think that the DI for Portal 2 is, I think it's a really positive thing, and it's probably, at the moment, for me, the most enjoyable aspect of the game. But it feels like it wants to be collaborative. If I'm making a map to play with some friends, like a multiplayer one, I'd rather have those friends in there with me, watching what I'm doing or participating, helping place things. I'd love to be able to work.
I thought that was a feature.
No. Nope.
It isn't?
That's odd.
I thought that was like one of the things that they advertised.
Well, the co-op campaign stuff would have convinced me that the creative stuff was collaborative as well.
Yeah, no, unless...
I'm surprised no one's modded that in then.
Yeah, I don't know. Unless it's something
that would be ripe for someone.
That someone has unless it's been pushed live and I didn't notice. But when it started, I remember being really disappointed that I couldn't get Mim into the editor with me to mess around on stuff.
I was really disappointed that they didn't bring it to PS3.
But
tumbleweed there.
It's, I don't know. Is it harder? It's harder to get content on a console.
The game's
like that,
fine. No?
No? Or is that just Xbox?
Not really. I mean, if you have a...
Well, I mentioned Little Big Planet, didn't I?
Yeah, probably just Xbox.
No, there are plenty of games that have user-generated content on.
Oh no,
on
I mean
PS3.
developers pushing content out.
Oh, you mean sort of updates and the rest? It's gotten far better in the last year or two. Some of that because they've had this pressure from people like Steam and the rest. But I mean, games like Payday 2, they're just putting out another PS3 patch today, so it's still fairly easy.
Okay. Well, if it's easy, then it'd be nice to see. So moving on, what sort of stuff have you been playing, John, lately?
I mentioned earlier, Painkiller beta went up, so I dipped into that for a few hours. Today I popped into Payday 1 just because I was feeling a bit reminiscent. It's such a shame that didn't get ported, even with their engine being apparently Linux friendly. I've also been in Portal because I was trying to complete those challenge rooms, and I added on a couple of percentage of completion, but I just cannot seem to do some of them because I just don't get the portals down in time.
Yeah.
And some Teleglitch.
How's Teleglitch?
Surprisingly good. I think I saw someone play it on YouTube, Kurt J. Mack. It's a roguelike, top-down view. You're in this abandoned facility. There are, weird biological life forms that you have to research that are basically there to kill you. And, you walk around, you scrounge parts, you can make stuff. So it's, sort of survival. It's very interesting. And I would urge anyone to get it. It's quite a cheap game. It's good fun. I've also been playing Euro Truck Simulator 2. That recently got a social site pushed out, worldoftrucks.com. So you can register for that, and you can share screenshots and get customized registration plates for your vehicle.
Wow.
I know it's the best feature yet.
I'm sure that if you're playing it, that it feels like it's exciting and interesting, but when you haven't played it from the outside, it just seems so boring and inane.
It sounds absurd, but
I do enjoy the screenshots, because the only screenshots I ever see in my queue are people who flipped the truck over. Every single one could be captioned.
I was doing my second job and I was bombing down a motor.
What?
I was going really fast down what would you call it? Interstates.
Oh yeah.
So I was bombing down a European one, and there was a really sharp 180 off it. You turn around and go under a bridge that it crosses over. And I'd started slowing down. I thought, this will be fine. Started turning, and the vehicle just started leaning slowly. I was like, I'll slow down a bit. And I got it up on half of the wheels, still going around the corner, and about 10 seconds later, it just sort of stopped and rolled over. It's like, this is silly. And of course, the truck, they don't sort of reset like in a rally game or whatever. So all I did was I detached the trailer, and then my truck righted itself, and I just couldn't do anything. There's, all you can do is reset the whole mission. And then you literally have to call up a thing to collect your truck and take it back, and they charge you lots of money. It's like, oh, god damn it. But yeah, it's surprisingly fun. It's a bit absurd, but yeah.
Yeah, every single picture I've ever seen, of every screenshot I've ever seen, it just could be captioned, "You had one job." All of us.
Exactly. It's really oddly fun learning to park one of these, semi trucks. It's really odd.
What about you, Flibit? What have you been playing?
Last week, in an attempt to do something that wasn't at my desk, I actually got I'm actually the one person above just 7 that has a 2DS now. Really like it. I have giant hands, and it's like completely comfortable. And in an attempt to be as trendy as possible by being 6 months late, I'm now playing Animal Crossing, the new one. It's a lot of fun. The only problem is that one of the main mechanics of the new one is one of the things that I totally ignored in all the previous ones, which is you have to actually maintain your town instead of like just goofing off and fishing, which is what I do the whole time. As for actual games that I've played aside from that, I did poke around in the 3DS Ocarina of Time, because the only reason I have that, I actually bought it when it came out, even though I'm only now getting a 2DS, because it was the one time they said, like, if you register this game, if you buy it and register it, they'll send you a copy of the soundtrack on a CD, which they never ever do, like, even for sale. So I'm like, all right, you win, Nintendo. So I ended up grabbing that, and then, but like on the desktop, mostly because I've been working on it, I've been playing a ton of Rogue Legacy, because it's actually really, really fun. And what else have I been playing? Like, I haven't been playing too much, because this holiday season is going to be release hell for me, so not a whole lot. I actually, the new Shadow Warrior I actually played. It's really fun, and I actually really like it. It's like all of the problems that you would expect in other titles actually work to its advantage in this game. Like the fact that you have a katana, usually it's like, I remember in Shadowrun, remember the FPS Shadowrun that nobody bought? I actually like had a copy of it. I got it for like free somehow. And you can actually get a katana in that game. And it kind of sucked unless everybody had one, which was kind of the case. Whereas in Shadow Warrior, when you have a katana, it actually works well, and you end up using the actual rest of the weapons for ranged combat, which actually makes sense. Like, for some reason, we think of, like, first-person shooters are, like, up close, even though it's their guns, so why would you do that? So, in Shadow Warrior, it actually works really well. And they actually just released, like, a DLC thing where you have to clean up the mess afterwards.
Oh,
Did you guys see that?
Oh, the visceral cleanup.
Yes.
That's probably the smartest sort of co-branding ever.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty funny. I was kind of surprised. I thought it would just, like, be, like, Duke Nukem levels are just, like, kind of dumb, but it actually is, like, amusing at some points. Like, this sidekick character you have is actually funny as hell.
I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube, and the main guy is called Wang, isn't he?
Lo Wang.
Oh yeah, the character's name is called Lo. He's an Asian person called Lo Wang, which as someone like that myself, I very much appreciated it.
Yeah, I enjoyed Shadow Warrior more than Duke Nukem.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I actually did not play either of those games originally. I actually did some recent work on those games for. You'll see. Like, I can say that I worked on it, but what it is, you'll find out soon. Hopefully, if it ends up shipping. But yeah, the new Shadow Warrior is great, and like it's a very good parody of like. 'Cause the thing is, like, when you think of like the old like kung fu movies, like that's like such an outdated genre, but it actually still kind of works.
Yeah, it totally does.
Like, where it's like the character's like,
Where it's not entirely deadly serious.
It's not like as stupid as like Kung Pao Enter the Fist, I think, or like Enter the, you know, that one where they like reshot the movie with another guy. I forget. Yeah, but this was like, you know, like the sidekick goes, you know, like, you know, the prophecy foretold of you having this thing, and he's like, really? What else does it say? What else does the prophecy say? Like the character, like Lo Wang suddenly gets serious, and he's like, the prophecy also says that the hero will believe any dumbass thing that he's told.
Nice.
Nice.
I think that for me, like,
So it's pretty great.
having the grounding in that kind of kung fu movie, like B-grade kung fu movie type stuff, makes it, I don't know, makes it feel less gratuitous than something like Duke Nukem does. Because I don't know, I have trouble not comparing the two games.
Well, the thing is, Shadow Warrior has focus by sticking to that particular genre
Exactly.
or style, whereas Duke Nukem's like just generic pop culture. But yeah, like Shadow Warrior, on top of like that, it does have like a lot of references to Devolver titles, as it turns out. Like there's a ton of Hard Reset references, because they made Hard Reset, and then there's like Hotline Miami and Serious Sam. There's like stuff in there plastered throughout the game. Some of it's kind of whorish.
So the remake has new content as well.
Oh yeah, they have like a Hotline Miami katana that you can, if you have that game, it'll work. Or I think if you pre-ordered it, it works. But yeah, like it's like some of it's like they have an arcade, and like all the arcade machines are like Serious Sam arcade and like Hotline Miami as an arcade stand-up, a cabinet. That's what it's called. Aside from that and Animal Crossing, I did fiddle with the scapegoat a bit, but other than that, I haven't touched too much because I've been burning through Rogue and fixing the scapegoat issues and working on the holiday season, which is coming up like really soon. It's at that point where it's like I'll stare at my screen for like 2 minutes just to like calm down, and then I look up and it's like 2 hours. So yeah.
Is Gomez getting a Santa hat or something?
I haven't touched Fez in a while. Like Fez is one of those games that is done, and I'm happy that I'm happy in the way that it's done, because sometimes you kind of like Waveform, the stack allocator that I kept mentioning in the interview, it's still kind of an issue, and it's like if I go back and do the SDL2 update, I'll probably take a whack at that again. But like for Fez, it's done, and I'm happy with where it is. Like it ended up being a really good port, which I was very happy with because it's Fez.
Yeah.
And Rogue Legacy is looking very similar. Like we've only gotten like one bug report, and it's related to performance, so
Nice.
it's like, okay, I'm happy with this one too. And the client cellar door is apparently shocked that it's working this well.
Would you be keen to do Fez 2 if Fez 2 existed?
Yes. But that's assuming Fez 2 exists, which as far as I know, it doesn't.
No.
It wouldn't surprise me if Phil decided that he did want to keep doing it just quietly, privately.
Apparently he's like doing like DJing now. Like I've seen his name show up as like the DJ for all these events. I'm wondering if he did that. Looks, I mean, it's cool. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, as someone who works in games and just like knows that level of BS, it's like if you can find something else that's just enjoyable without like having to like give up something, then dude, that's awesome. 'Cause sometimes like you wouldn't believe like there's some like game devs, if you could like be in that bubble and not have to deal with like the what often feels like extra stuff, you know, that'd be nice, but you really can't avoid that. So it's like, you know, how do you get around that? And if there is no way around it, then you gotta find something else to do. Because some people are just like incessant for absolutely no reason. Like there's some things like, you know, when Vessel was taking forever to ship. Okay, I get it. There's like you're gonna ask where the crap is it, because it was supposed to be out like 11 billion months ago. Perfectly reasonable. But then there's like the level where it's like, you know,
your family and mailbox are at risk.
Right. Like genuinely at risk. Like I remember there was an article somewhere a while ago, community managers in particular, just like getting like creepy stuff in their mailbox for real. Weird stuff like that. So I can't imagine. It's great that I'm technically still a nobody, which is great. So it's like, you know, if I screw up, the worst I'll get is a very justified mail saying, you know, you're an idiot and you should fix this. I'll go, okay, I really should. As opposed to just like, I'm going to kill your children because your name makes me mad for no reason. Okay, that's a little bit weird.
The thing is, Humble don't do a lot of community management either, so you're kind of receiving the brunt of, or at least with Vessel, you know, we're receiving stuff that probably should have been handled by somebody else's PR department.
Well, not really, because it's my port and my problem. So, I mean, like, they're very bare bones, where it's like they don't even have a store, even though they have a Humble store.
Yes.
But like, you know, there's some things where it's like port stuff. That's my problem, not theirs.
But you're a contractor. There's no way that you are the person where the buck stops. somebody else has hired you to work for them, and it's their responsibility to deal with the external forces.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about, because if it's directly related to the port, then obviously that's my deal. But if it's like just a general game thing, it's like, okay, I can just send this to them. It's not a big deal.
Well, if there's feedback that's got to make its way to you, then sure. But having to deal with the kind of that people are cranky about it being late or whatever else, that's not your problem.
I don't know. I respectfully disagree. We'll go with that.
It's your problem from a perspective of you're under a contract, but it's not your responsibility to deal with the users.
The problem is who would, though? And, who has... Because, it'd be cool if I could just never do support ever, because then, I wouldn't have to deal with emails. But I'm the only person that's qualified to do it, and honestly, I actually would like to be the one to do... I actually like doing support, so it's fine. And that's just one of those things. Like, some people would love to not have to ever answer a support email, but I don't really fall in that category.
Most of the people I know, like, not just in software development, but also out elsewhere, if they've got a third party doing, the contracted to do the actual, the labor and the groundwork and stuff, they still take the support calls. They vet everything through and work out what needs to be raised and what you need to get people onto. When I phone up because I've got a telephone problem, I don't talk to the contractor. I talk to my telephone provider, and then they end up sorting out somebody to deal with it.
Yeah, I don't know. Given certain approaches, particularly for like independent companies, like when there's only 5 of us anyway, like for AV&T, we just have one support mailbox, and when that got added, they just added me to the list. So yeah,
I mean, it certainly is more efficient if you can get feedback directly and not have to go through other people, but it's their stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like once the port stuff is done, then obviously the game stuff is up to them. But it's sometimes, very rarely, I'll deal with general issues. Like there were some Rogue Legacy things that I was able to fix during the port, and it worked to everyone's benefit. But when it comes to support, it's like if I can pick out a general issue, then it's like Kenny probably knows better than I do. I'll give it to him. It's funny that we're talking about all this stuff because this is actually the next thing in our notes is Scapegoat and Rogue Legacy. Is there any? Because I know John, you were playing with Rogue Legacy as a tester actually. And the Scapegoat as well.
I was, yeah. I'm pretty terrible at platformers. I don't know whether it's just reaction times or what, but a Scapegoat, can't remember how far I got in that, but 0 problems. Rogue Legacy, sometimes I get a slight hiccup, as you said, performance-wise, but other than that, it's really hard to find problems. You play a game, and then I start asking you really, really ridiculous questions like, these numbers are looking wrong, and then you're like, oh yeah, there's a character stat modifier. I'm like, oh, duh.
So some of it's funny because like I didn't play the game all the way through when I started the port, so when I would find those things too, and I'd be like, wait, what? And then I'd have to look at the stats and be like, oh,
I know.
This character exaggerates, or this character is dyslexic, so the text isn't getting margled.
When it says that they don't get sensation in their feet.
Oh yeah, the peripheral arterial disease, I believe. It means you can, those like spikes that jump out of the floor, you can just walk over those.
Oh really? Neat.
And I think you can actually walk over floor spikes as well. I don't know if that's true. I'm too afraid to try.
Oh,
By the time I get an opportunity, I'm almost dead, so I never test it.
This is the problem. I'm sort of level 40 or something. I mean, it took me a couple of iterations of the character or something to actually work out what the hell I was doing, because I hadn't heard of Rogue Legacy. And it's really weird that, just the whole mechanic of, you start again, it's a completely different castle unless you lock it down. And in locking it down, you get less drops from, chests and such. You've got to decide whether it's worth going back to that one secret chest you found, gold chest, or what are they called? Fairy chests?
Yeah.
Yes. The first time I went for one that I could actually understand how to get to, it said, you couldn't look at it. And I didn't work out how the hell I could walk to it. And then I realised, you can do that you can scoot in a direction or the other. So you look away from the chest and then scoot backwards. And that was the first time I'd opened one of these chests. And then I was like, oh, hang on. Hey, Flibit, the achievements aren't popping. You're like, oh, I was just fiddling with something. And then it's like, okay. I think to test a game like that to its completion, you have to be because he's good at those sort of games.
Oh, yeah, yes.
I haven't been able to finish one of the mini bosses yet. I've gotten close, but I'm that bad at platformers, and I know he's nearly opened that door.
Oh no, he's done it multiple times.
Oh, he has. Oh, Jesus.
He's on like New Game Plus Plus or something, isn't he? He's actually in this room. It's really funny that so many people who tested Rogue Legacy are in this room. Yeah, but it's really, yeah. If you want to know why Rogue Legacy went out so stable, it's because he ripped it up to bits.
I think that's the problem. He was doing it weeks and weeks and weeks before I got there. So
You came in basically a couple days before we shipped, so I don't even think
Yeah.
you were like, well, there's this one Steamworks thing. I'm like, not really.
I think Fez is the one that I properly fully tested. All the others have been, a couple of hours, seems fine. Everyone's already got these bugs in already. Can't really do much.
Yeah. Rogue Legacy goes in that pile. Funny how many games I've worked on that have bugs that I'm not really sure if they're bugs or not. Like Rogue Legacy, Proteus, a couple games like that where I'm just like, I'm really not sure. I have to ask the dev if that's right.
I think quite a lot of the games you've had, the developers have been exploring different mechanics, and I think that's probably the most interesting thing that you've been able to do with your ports, the fact that all these games have different inventive things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to be able to tell my brother, who is a theoretical physicist, that I just a game where you can have irritable bowel syndrome, and he's just like, okay. Or I can just call when my dad calls me and asks, what did you just ship? And I'm like, you'll never guess what it involves. Aren't you proud? It's like,
How did your brother feel when you said you shipped a game where you can play as a photon?
Ooh. Was that a photon?
Are you referring to Waveform?
Waveform. Yeah, you play as a photon.
Is it a photon? The funny thing is I just think of it as a dot. I think of it as a globe.
That was one of my questions that I sort of forgot to ask. I was going to actually ask, what the hell am I?
Oh, well, yeah.
I'm sure you're a photon. If not, then I'm making it up to make it make sense.
Oh, yeah. I showed it to him when it was new. I don't think he paid too much attention to it. But yeah, it's always fun showing some of the weirder stuff to family, and because they weren't really sure what was going to happen when I started reporting games, and it's like, oh, here's this nonsense that I get paid to do.
We've gone in the weeds an awful lot there.
We've exhausted a lot of time here.
Cheese. What have you been playing recently?
Oh, I just have word from Ryan. He says it's sort of undefined, but yeah, something like that. A photon, a ball of light.
He's probably really surprised we're still talking about.
So yeah, I've been playing a little bit of TF2. Got time to play a few rounds of Medieval with Mim the other day. I've been playing a little bit of Worms Reloaded as well, Costume Quest for Game Club. I've been playing a bit more Distance as well, and I managed to slip in some Super Hexagon, and obviously playing the Fall prototype. It's heaps of fun.
How far are you in Hexagon? Because I'm actually interested in seeing how far people get in that game.
I don't know, like 50 seconds on the easiest.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think I'm about that bad as well.
I haven't played it much. I like that when I've been playing for 5 to 10 minutes, I get much further. That I kind of get into a rhythm, and it's on some level almost predictable, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
I find I get into a zone, and then as soon as I realise I'm in that zone, I fall out of it straight away, and then I quit, because I know I'm not going to get back into it in that day, because I get frustrated.
And you mentioned Distance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually backed that too. I didn't get the alpha though, and I'm assuming it's amazing already.
Oh, it's fun. Yeah, it is. It's pre-release, and it feels pre-release, but it's fun, and it's nice to just sit down and zip through a couple of tracks. To spend 5 minutes playing just to unwind.
Yeah, because I know those guys did a pretty good design. I know, and I've spoken briefly with Jordan Hemingway, who did the audio, which the audio in that is awesome, as is the soundtrack. Yeah. So it's like, okay, it's gonna be good.
The one thing I find to be least enjoyable is the transition from driving to flight mechanics. There's a little bit of dead time, which there needs to be, so that you can transition from driving controls to flight controls. But even still, your pitch controls are your throttle and brake, which means that if you're accelerating as fast as you can and then you jump into the air, the first thing you're going to do is nosedive into the ground that you just came from. So you sort of got to let go as soon as you press that. And then, I don't know, it just kind of feels a bit odd to do that.
I have to remember how the flight controls worked in Nitronic Rush, because they worked there, but if maybe they're doing a little bit more involvement with the flight section, because the flight in the original game was just like, you just have wings. That was it.
Yeah, I never got to play Nitronic Rush. I didn't get it working under Wine.
Yeah, I don't remember if I ended up getting that working or if I just rebooted to fiddle with it. I don't remember.
It's heaps of fun. I really like it. I'm hoping that they do some more content, because I'd like some more tracks to play on. And I hope that they move up to a beta so that I can have more people to play with.
Yeah, once the beta... I should have beta access, so that'll be good.
Yeah, it'd be sweet. Yeah, I got 2 copies of the alpha, and the person I gave it to doesn't play it multiplayer, so I kind of missed out.
Oh well.
That's cool. So moving on, we've got the Humble Bundle with Android 7 launched within the last fortnight.
And then for this bundle, it had the 2 that I remember are Worms and Anodyne.
Yep.
Worms is a standout one for me.
I'm familiar with Worms, and then Anodyne because I love that game.
So it's Worms Reloaded, The Bard's Tale, Ticket to Ride, Greedcore, Incredipede, and Anodyne, which is a really good selection.
Oh yeah, Greedcore and Incredipede I was looking at, having time to check out. Have you had a chance to play any, John?
I beta tested Greedcore and Worms Reloaded. Really good games. The others I haven't got around to. I haven't actually bought the bundle yet, but I probably am going to do that this weekend. The developer for Anodyne has been talking on the Steam community about a Linux port.
Wait, where?
The link I just put in the thing.
Oh, the thing.
But he's basically said that a port would be a waste of time to bring it natively to the platform.
Oh, this is recent.
Yeah, and Air is a pain in the arse, so it's unlikely to come, sadly, which is understandable.
Yeah, because I keep joking that like I could get him to like let me do a C version, but then people started taking that seriously. And it's like, oh crap, sorry, Sean. But yeah, it's like I mean, Air's fine.
Wow.
As long as you're willing to like hack around, it takes a little bit of hackery.
Yeah.
For even the Ocean, they're doing OpenFL, so that'll be a lot nicer.
Yeah. So one thing noting about Worms in particular is that it doesn't look like we've got cross-platform multiplayer. We can play with Mac users, but not Windows users. Yeah.
Not to Windows, at least. That sounds like a history from the Mac port.
Yeah.
It was ported to Mac first. That wasn't compatible. But of course, because it had its networking redone to be sort of POSIX-based, it works fine on Linux, but not back to Windows.
The downside here is those of us who have Windows friends that we already play with are going to have to keep Blood Under Wine.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
Which is sad for me, because I do have people I play it with.
Yeah, I don't know... Because I don't know... All I know is that Edward did the port. That's the only detail I have. Like, this bundle, I was totally out of the loop, because, after 9, and now I'm pretty much going to be pushing towards the next major thing that I ended up doing, which I'm going to... because it's going to keep pushing forward, and... The bundles are more frequent, as you can tell. So,
I'm surprised they're not getting more burnout from not just the actual purchasers, but from the porters as well.
Well, it's funny because Ryan's been mostly out this year because I think he's just doing other things this year, much bigger projects. So I don't know that for sure. I haven't spoken to him, but
in the last week he's mentioned he's been slyly mentioned he's at Tripwire doing something.
Oh, okay, so maybe that's where he's been. But yeah. I mean, Edward's done a fair amount of stuff. I think Worms took him a long time. And then for me, I've been just burning through MGSDL2 stuff all year. So it's like 2014 is going to slow down significantly once the holidays are over. But yeah.
Where do you think more Linux ports are going to come from? Because you've been doing quite a few XNA ones, and some of these are quite popular PC ones. Do you think people are going to be looking back at current gen console games, at least digital ones, and bringing them up on PC or something?
I don't know. I haven't been paying any attention to that.
Fair enough.
With SteamOS and the Steam Machine stuff, I think maybe that is something that people will start considering if they go, hey, I can get into this kind of Steam console-ish environment and also get PC support for potentially no extra work. Then that makes that a little bit more attractive,
Well, I don't think it's ever potentially no extra work. But yeah, I see what you mean, yeah.
For PC as far as Linux goes anyway.
Yeah.
If you're doing SteamOS, then presumably there is no extra work to support Linux.
Considering if you go straight in with SDL2, you've got the 3 platforms and a console supported already.
I should scapegoat on Steam. We actually originally shipped it with MGSDL2 for all platforms, but just today we actually switched Windows back to XNA because OpenGL requirements. The thing is, we can actually get away with OpenGL 3 on Mac and Linux pretty easily, but for Windows, turns out that's not really the case. So we're actually reverting it back to XNA, which
that's a shame.
Yeah, it made deployment a little bit easier, but I mean, XNA is technically always going to be better in that it's the original spec. So
yeah,
it's. I mean, we still have the Mac and Linux versions happy, and so for Mac and Linux users, they're not going to see a difference. But Windows users, if they had problems with low system requirements, that should be resolved as of today, the 18th. Other than that, the launch has been pretty nice.
Nice. Rogue Legacy also got launched this week, didn't it?
Yes, it shipped in on Wednesday, which was the 16th, and that also went really well.
So a busy week for you.
Busy entire month, and September as well.
Other releases, Monaco is launching on Monday for Linux, which is great news.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's been pretty quiet in the news, and it's just popped up from nowhere.
Well, it's been a pretty quiet release in general, because I know the only news I've heard about that is that they had to delay the Xbox version at some point. Other than that, I haven't seen much about it.
It was spotted on SteamDB a couple of weeks ago. A couple of the gaming sites announced it a few days ago as coming to Linux and Mac, and then, it's very odd.
I wonder if we'll see it as a making a humble debut somewhere, maybe, or showing up as a bonus in something, or maybe we won't see it in a bundle at all for quite some time.
Maybe just on Humble Store or something.
It's an interesting release date.
Yes, Monday. I mean, it fits the window for a beat the average, doesn't it? But maybe it's not coming in that.
Well, it's a bit early for bonus titles for this bundle.
Well, right. It's just like the Monday part is what makes it all weird. So
Yeah.
But it will be good to play regardless.
Oh yes, looking forward to it.
So the Dark mod has gone standalone now. They've migrated to the open source release of the Doom 3 engine, ID Tech 4, and are now providing a version of the game which doesn't require Doom 3 to be installed, which is fantastic. It's this kind of first-person heavily thief-inspired, stealth, steampunk, medieval type game. I haven't had a go at the standalone version, which also includes a huge number of content and gameplay updates, but I've played it before and it's lots of fun. I've been looking forward to getting back into it.
Great. The latest Indie Royale bundle includes one Linux title, Perfection.
This game actually looks kind of neat.
Where?
What's that, Flibit?
I'm like looking it up now.
There's something about it that makes me think of Splice.
Oh, yeah. This was in an Intel Tech competition, I think.
Was it in that one?
Think it was.
Oh, wow.
You're basically trying to reduce a shape from however they've created it to fit another shape. So you're slicing bits off, sort of like Metal Gear Solid.
Wait, Metal Gear Solid has that?
The melon slicing.
Or wasn't that the one with the slicing watermelons?
Yeah, that one.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
Just random trivia. Geez.
Okay.
Yeah, this is nonsense.
Did this didn't come to like a tablet or something, did it? It looks very much like a casual game too. Not I'm insulting casual games.
Right. I mean, it's just, I actually don't know the history. The only thing I remember is that I remember seeing it winning an award for the Intel thing, and that was it.
Okay, but yeah, that looks pretty neat. Duke Nukem Manhattan. I mean, none of the other ones are even going to be coming, are they? Cities in Motion. That's already been in a bundle via Humble, hasn't it? And Empire. Never heard of that either. Trine 2.
Yay!
The complete story edition is now available via the Humble store on Frozen Byte's website. So that's DRM free, and you get a Steam key with it.
So since they launched the complete story edition up until now, anybody who wanted to pick it up DRM free hasn't really been able to, aside from that one time that Trine 2 was included in a Humble Bundle promotion. And there have been a few people I've spotted asking for it, and I've referred them back to Frozen Byte when I've spotted them. It's great to see this now available for people who missed out.
Yeah, it's great. They also announced recently that, well, was it on the same post that Trine 1 got an update on Steam for trading cards?
Oh, it did it?
Yep. It would have been lovely if they'd have just refreshed their port at the same time, but I think we'll get in touch with them again, see if there are any updates on that.
Yeah, I'll give them a nudge.
Right, so another game we've mentioned a few casts ago, Dark Matter, which is an abuse-style platformer. Do you want to talk about that, Cheese?
Yeah, so that's from Interwave, the guys that made Nuclear Dawn. They had a crowdfunding campaign for this a little while back that failed, and they said they were going to keep working on it. So now it's been released. It's kind of got sort of story, adventure gamey type elements in it as well, which kind of make it a little bit different from Abuse. I haven't had a chance to pick it up yet, but I'm hoping to be able to scrape some money together to grab it soon. I was kind of really excited about it when it was having the crowdfunding campaign running. But yeah, it's great to see them still moving ahead and pushing that out the door. And also something that we didn't have in our show notes is that Interwave have said that they're making progress with the Linux port of Nuclear Dawn as well. So that's fantastic.
Oh, awesome. I slipped this other title in just before we started. It's a game called Roundabout. You're a chauffeur of a limousine, and for some reason it's constantly revolving. Okay, bear with me with this. You have to navigate around streets, collecting...
Okay.
I think they're just tokens, but there might be something a bit more thematic with them. while you're spinning to, minimize the amount of damage you get on the vehicle. It's a really, really wacky idea, but you can currently pick that up from their website, and that's on all the 3 platforms. And I thought that was worth pointing out because they're trying to get through on Greenlight at the moment.
On Greenlight, it says it was created by somebody named Delicious Bees. I approve.
Nice.
This dude, jeez, does this not of the astronomy music like the spinning?
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh god, it's so weird.
It is. It's sort of if Crazy Taxi was done by one person, and he had this really weird idea. Why doesn't it spin as well?
It does look cool.
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty much what we did for astronomy music? Was we're going, oh, it's spinning. Okay, it's spinning now.
Yeah, physics. Of course, this is probably significantly better, and it also it's weird how there's like a burst in like Octodad like games. I'm loving it. Where it's like you basically the whole goal is surrounds completely being awkward.
Oh yeah, that game. I think it's brilliant that Sony are publicizing it so much because it's just mental.
Octodad 2 got greenlit, yeah, with promising Linux support. We haven't seen that yet, have we?
Oh yeah, a while back. It was one of the first ones to get greenlit, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Still looking forward to checking that out. So if we are really fast, maybe we're going to squeeze in under 3 hours here.
I bloody doubt it.
Then we've got like 5 or 10 minutes left.
Xonotic. This is a first-person shooter, and they put a blog post up because they keep getting questions. Why aren't you on Steam? Why aren't you going through Greenlight, etc., etc.
I was just going to say, for anybody who's not familiar, Xonotic is what Nexu became once the name was yoinked for that other game.
Nexu is, yeah. The other game being that. They basically go through and just explain that the game they still feel is in beta, so it's not really ready to, even approach something like Greenlight. I think they said they were concerned about Steamworks being integrated just because they're an open source platform and the issues with that.
Yeah.
I don't really know. Beyond sort of saying that, and to anyone expecting it to arrive, just, have some patience.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it would be super nice to see something come out of that. But at the same time, people need to kind of respect that if you're running an open source project and it isn't ready and it potentially does have licensing issues, that's worth respecting, and that's a positive thing and something to celebrate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, quickly moving on to crowdfunding. We already briefly touched on Citizens of Earth earlier.
Just briefly, yes.
So don't forget that it's only got, I guess by the time the archive goes out, the campaign is probably going to be finished. Have a go at the demo.
I think it might be a little tight to get this out, yeah. There's a Double Fine game that I'm sure you're going to want to talk about, Chi, so go ahead with Space Base.
Yeah, so,
is that really crowdfunding though? Isn't that just a pre-order?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. People get in at a tier. They're funding development, so yeah, crowdfunding.
I thought it was isn't Indie Fund funding this project too?
And Humble is actually.
Yeah, they got 3 official funding sources plus whatever the community can throw at them. But it's not uncommon for crowdfunded titles that run through Kickstarter or whatever to have extra funds from some other kind of organization. Like the bulk of Star Citizen's funding isn't coming from the community.
Is this the first title that Humble have put their name on as a funder?
Yes.
It may well be, yeah.
I wonder why. They need the money from Humble.
Humble and Double Fine seem very friendly. Like they cooperate on a lot of things, and they make a ton of money when they do.
Yeah, there is a strong relationship at work there. Without going too much into stuff, Double Fine did get a lot of money from their first crowdfunding campaign and got a good amount for Massive Chalice as well. But that money's tied up on those projects, and they also have a number of additional projects that haven't been announced that they're working on. And by bringing in extra funding, that frees them up to avoid taking on publisher money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of comfortable with them doing this. But anyway, Space Base DF9 was one of the Amnesia Fortnite titles, which was part of their Amnesia Fortnite event earlier this year. I think it was this year. No, it was 2012.
Was it? I don't remember. It was such a long time ago.
Yeah, sorry, 2012.
He's been blogging about this for a while, hasn't he? Being in development or something?
No, until it was launched, nobody knew what it was. I mean, a lot of us sort of assumed that he was working on that. He kind of, for the past month or so, he's just kind of been going, oh, I wish I could tell you guys what I'm working on, having fun working on this thing that I can't talk about. But yeah, so they've been working solidly on it since Amnesia Fortnight, and it's now at a point where they can show off something that is more polished than the Amnesia Fortnight prototype, because they went back and started again from scratch.
The person we're talking about is Vector Poem on Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his name because I suck at French names.
Whatever.
Everyone just calls him JP, so it's JP Le Breton.
Or Vector Poem, apparently.
Yeah, so he worked on like Bioshock 2 and Thief 2 and a whole bunch of other stuff as well.
R.I.P. to K. Merrin.
But yeah, so space-based DF9 is kind of like a city building game where you build a space station. You got to keep your space people happy and keep them safe from marauders and things. Seems like really nice and really interesting to see Double Fine doing a systems-oriented game, whereas everything they've published to date has been kind of more story-oriented and sort of linear campaign-oriented. So yeah, it's kind of nice to see the diversification there and the celebration of some of the the great designer talent that they've got. Seeing JP take a lead of a Double Fine game is really nice.
And if you want a good overview of how that game plays, Welsh Pixie has done a couple of YouTube videos that I'll link in the show notes.
Yeah.
And she was one of the guests because they're developing the Maker's Eden. Anyway, did you want to talk about Skyjacker?
Okay. Skyjacker is like a space combat sim crossed with like the Spore Creature Creator. They had a crowdfunding campaign that failed a while back. They've continued to work on it. Actually, I think they may have had a couple of crowdfunding campaigns, but they were greenlit in very recently as well, which is nice for them. But the idea is that you play as like this kind of marauding space pirate, and you take down ships that you come across, and the ships are like hugely detailed and destructible, so you can like blast off components and then pick those up, and you can integrate those into your own ship. So it's kind of really interesting gameplay potential for like ship customization, and the fact that you've got to go out and kind of harvest parts and stuff from ships that can defend themselves makes that kind of interesting as well.
It also says it's going to support co-op, so multiplayer space. Oh, getting excited already.
I know, right? It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could do with like a Linux compatible revamp of the entire X-Wing franchise.
Oh, that would be nice. And maybe Dark Forces as well, just because I like shooters.
Yeah, Dark Forces are nice. But I think DOSBox is okay for Dark Forces.
Yeah, DOSBox cover that. Or you could play OpenJK for the newer games in that series.
It's a good suggestion, yeah.
Yeah, but the newer games in the series, like, they're not... For me, I enjoyed Jedi Knight and stuff, but for me, the big thing about Dark Forces, the thing that made it special, was that you were not a Jedi. You were just this guy. You were as weak and as vulnerable as anybody else, and you crawled around on the underbelly and you dealt with stuff. You were this kind of freelance agent running around the universe doing exciting stuff, and then you got caught up in this Empire business that you kind of didn't really want to be involved with. But then in Jedi Knight, it all becomes path to becoming the one. And while that's fun on some levels, it's just something that you don't see in the Star Wars universe. Dark Forces was special for that reason, I think.
The problem was, whenever someone was playing Dark Forces, they didn't want to just wave a lightsaber around. They wanted to force push, barrels over. They wanted, to pick people up or electrocute them, and that's why, Jedi Knight and everything got to be the norm, because people want those superpowers.
Oh yeah, for sure. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who appreciate Dark Forces for what it is, separately of its successors.
So, thank you all for listening to a fairly lengthy SteamLUG Cast.
Thanks to Flibit and Ryan for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you for coming. You can contact us at cast@steamlug.org. We would love your feedback.
Yep, and you can follow us on Twitter at SteamLUG.
And that's about it. Thank you for listening.
We have to talk about astronomy music. We have to keep that in. I put a link in the top of the show notes, John, so make sure that doesn't get left out.
Crimea? I think that's how you say it.
Crimea. We're not off to a good start if we can't even say the name.
Yeah, we can't cut that, John.
Okie doke.
That's totally going to be in there now. we can copy and paste Ryan's soundbite and put it at the end, make him say thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.